There are more answers than you know.
Each had multiple stab wounds. Some had defensive wounds, showing they fought with the attacker. And there was no sexual assault. County Coroner Kathy Mabbutt is describing the murders as personal.
Okay, everybody, welcome or welcome back to What's the Obsession True Crime. How are you guys doing? Thanks for being here tonight on this little bit of an impromptu live stream. I'm trying to figure out which one works best. I don't know. Yeah, we have to see that. Oh, God, this man, he is just absolutely enraging, isn't he? So welcome to all of you who are coming in. Thank you so much for being here, moderators. You guys are absolutely wonderful. Hey, MH6499, welcome. How are you doing? Good to see you. The Beehive, love it. BK is innocent. Okay, well, I don't know if he does get the trial that he's seeking through the post-conviction relief that, was one of the avenues that everybody knew was going to be available to him when the prosecutors, Bill Thompson and his team, were trying to, in my opinion, convince the families to eat the plea deal, to not keep the death penalty on the table and go to trial. Oh, well, if he pleads, he's not going to be able to appeal. That's part of the plea deal. It's a deal. He can't appeal. Well, everybody who's followed true crime for a little while or knows anything about the legal process knows that outside of the criminal avenues for relief after you've been convicted of a crime and you've been sentenced, there are also civil avenues you can take. And that is exactly what Bryan Kohberger is doing. It's called post-conviction relief. It's the only legal relief that's available to him now. Legal relief meaning if he wants to ever get out of jail, because he is serving 4 life sentences plus in prison. I don't think he's liking it there too much. What do you guys think? The only available legal option he has at this time, well, guess what? Bitch is taking it. Are we not surprised? I'm not, because this man is made of steel, don't you think? Let me just say hello to other people. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing, my friend? Hey, Celtic Kelly. I'm in New York too, but more upstate. I lived in New York City for a while, though. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Honey Bun, Cuff You, Anaphylaxis, my girls, my team. You guys are amazing. Honey Bun has been a member for 41 months and just coming off COVID. She's bringing sexy back. That's damn awesome, girl. Bringing sexy back after COVID is quite a feat, and I hope you're feeling better. And I'm sorry I started late. I know it's a little bit late. I had a bunny medical emergency, and I don't want to say anything more about it because I'm a little emotional about it, but I think I have to get one of my bunnies put down tomorrow. So I was just dealing with that. But we're not going to cry. We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger when we get mad. All right. So are you guys all aware of exactly what's going on here? And here's another thing. So Netflix just came out with one of their, as to be expected these days, true crime documentaries on the Idaho 4 case. And it was called, I can't remember what it was called. But hey, guess what? Yours truly, What's the Obsession, this very channel, got a brief mentioning in the documentary. I couldn't believe it. I didn't really love the context in which it was mentioned in the documentary. But hey, you know what? I will take it, because if you've been with this channel for a while, you know that we have worked our asses off to get the facts, do the hard research, and present the story as it is with inside sources. And so far, everything that we have discussed on this channel has proven to, just be part of the factual story of this crime. So it was right around the time when this documentary comes out on Netflix, which really, it didn't say too much about Kohberger at all. It really featured the lives of the victims of Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Ethan Chapin. And, I wonder if he got wind of that and it just burnt his ass. And speaking of burning his ass, I don't think he's having a great time in prison as it is, but let's just get right into it. We're going to read through the handwritten post-conviction relief effort that has been granted, because today, just a few hours ago, Bryan Kohberger was in fact assigned at the taxpayer's expense a new attorney to handle this leg of his legal battle, not in the criminal world, but in the civil world, which could theoretically have the same result of getting a plea overturned and having a new trial, getting a new, shot at innocence or guilt. But it is very unlikely. So I have a few things to bring into the stream so we can better understand all of this together. And welcome. Thank you guys for being here. And please do say hello. Let us know where you're coming from. Let's see.
Representing Bryan Kohberger as he mounts a... This morning, a new attorney now representing Bryan Kohberger.
And this is just from today.
As he mounts a long shot bid to backtrack on his plea deal.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Court records now showing a new public defender assigned to Kohberger's case, more than a year after he agreed to a plea deal, admitting in open court to killing 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle, in their off-campus home. In handwritten documents filed last week, Kohberger now saying he was convinced to falsely confess by coercion, disinformation, false promises, and the withholding of exculpatory evidence. Also accusing his former public defender of ineffective assistance of counsel and suggesting without evidence that his plea deal was not voluntarily entered because of threats asserted by petitioner's legal counsel.
Now, here's one of the really interesting things, and this is something that I don't know if everybody is aware of. I haven't seen it very widely spoken about. We're going to watch a segment of an interview that Brian Entin did, whether you like him or not, with an expert, a forensic expert who's former law enforcement, who is going to testify on behalf of the defense, and that is Cy Ray. You may remember that name. You may be aware of what he was doing, as it relates to the, defense part of that case. He was on Brian Entin's YouTube channel the other day, and Brian Entin didn't interview him. Rather, he had Steve Goncalves and Olivia Goncalves connect with him because they had a lot of questions for him, and I think he was very forthcoming. He explained a lot of things that to me made a lot of sense, because there is, tried and true, factual evidence that corroborates what he said. It connects a lot of the dots. I mean, you can think, of course, what you want to think about it. But he also did bring up some new phone data evidence that I can't imagine would be anything but absolutely incriminating to the man you see right there. The man, the monster, the everything Olivia Goncalves called him. And so we're going to talk about what that is in just a little bit, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But also Cy Ray, this person who was going to testify on behalf of the defense, corroborates what I had already heard from a couple different reliable sources, that since Bryan Kohberger was sentenced and has been spending his days in prison staring at 4 walls and hopefully getting some action with some of his prison mates, that Ann Taylor has been visiting him at least once a week, sometimes more than once a week, and they talk on the phone regularly, sometimes daily. Now, typically when a defense attorney defends somebody and, whether the case goes to trial or there is a plea, they may stay in touch with them for, limited reasons for a limited period of time. But it is not normal, according to any defense or other attorney, to keep such a close relationship with a client that you previously represented once their legal business is done. So that was kind of scratch your head, as it was. I haven't been talking a lot about this case for reasons some of you know, reasons some of you don't know, on YouTube, but we are doing it again now. So that isn't something that we've all discussed together, but that is something that definitely has been going on. So now when Bryan Kohberger comes out with this post-conviction relief effort, and I'm going to read through it, it's very brief in just a moment, he completely throws his defense attorney, Ann Taylor, the woman you see right there, under the bus. So what is going on? How is he in the process of putting forth this motion for relief while Ann Kohberger is visiting him several times a week, talking on the phone with him sometimes almost daily for a much longer period of time than a former defense attorney and a client normally would after their legal case is settled? So what is going on? Is she going to fall on her sword? Did she advise him to do this? It's just, we have a puzzle to put together. And I really want to know what's going on, because this is just, something horrific for the families, something horrific for society to go through. And this slimy little snake of a Satan spawn is just doing what he's always done and playing whatever hand he can come up with in desperation to get his way at the expense of everyone's life around him. He's just selfish little incel. That's what we're going to call him today. Selfish little incel. Okay, so let me just go ahead and read you what he wrote. Is this the right one? I think it is. Let's see, I think it is this one. Is it this one? Sorry, guys. I think I put the docs right at the end of this here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so again, until this morning, Bryan Kohberger was not assigned a new defense attorney for this post-conviction relief effort, okay? Ooh, I'm going to have to maximize that. Oh boy, his handwriting's amazing. So this is what we're talking about here. Affidavit of facts in support of post-conviction petition, State of Idaho County, Ada. Bryan C. Kohberger, being here first duly sworn on oath, deposes and says, because his word's worth a whole lot, right? It is hereby declared that during attorney-client discussions, most of which have included all members of Bryan C. Kohberger's immediate family, petitioner was convinced, and the petitioner is himself, to falsely confess to capital murder and felony burglary by coercion, disinformation, false promises, and the withholding of exculpatory discovery. The following is something in the inception of the plea. Sorry, I just can't read his handwriting very well. 1, failure to inform petitioner of exculpatory discovery during the plea discussions, namely clumps of unknown hair found in Ethan Chapin's hands, as well as a failure. What the heck does that say? I read this earlier. I can't remember what it says now. A failure to, I'm sorry, I don't know what it says. Petitioner was convinced that the actual guilt was not, this is point number 2. So number 1 are the clumps of hair that were apparently found in Ethan's hand. We're going to address that. This has already been addressed. This is no surprise. We know about the hairs. There's an answer to the hairs. Issue number 2 for him is petitioner was convinced that actual guilt was not an important factor in considering plea acceptance. Now, this is a man who is pursuing his doctoral degree in criminal justice. How about that? The petitioner, he was convinced that actual guilt was not an important factor in considering the plea acceptance. Jeez. Death row was imminent and advised to lie. Petitioner was told it would be a legal victory for him to enter a false plea. And he puts legal victory in quotes as though Ann Taylor told him that very message in those exact words. So issue number 2 was that he felt that actual guilt, it wasn't an important factor in the plea agreement. It was just like an ancillary thing. We're not in trial for murder. Don't care if you're really guilty or innocent of this crime. This is insane. The death row was imminent, and he was advised to lie. He was told that submitting that plea was going to be a legal victory, the false plea. That's issue number 2. Number 3, a gross misrepresentation and promises regarding what a life sentence would immediately afford petitioner, and a gross misrepresentation of death row in Idaho, including an elaborate story of his counselor and his attorney Ann Taylor's horrific experience touring an actual 8x8 death row cell. So she scared him into it. She scared him into pleading, is what he's saying here. Here's one more page. Ooh, where's that other page? There it is. Short page. And then he says, all communicated to petitioner and his family by the IDOC through counsel, Idaho Department of Corrections through counsel, thus constituting threats and promises made to induce a plea agreement. Wow. So, and this apparently was filed on July 22nd, 2026, not so long ago, not even 2 weeks ago, right? So this is, in a way, not shocking, but shocking at the same time. Do you guys agree? What do you guys think so far? Yes, of course. My pleasure. Yes. The Beehive says, I do not trust Ann Taylor at all. Oh, I don't either. I do not either. I certainly don't. MH says, I think there's a larger plan with Ann Taylor. This was planned between Kohberger and Ann Taylor. I don't know for sure, but I'm suspicious. Well, I am now too, because as we dig further into this, like, what the fuck is going on? Hey, Andrea, how are you doing? BK is a creep. That's for damn sure. Let's see. Thanks for the jewels, Andrea. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You like Bryan Enton, to be clear, correct? Yeah. So, okay. So let's get into more. But I just want to see what you'd say. Cuffy says, I'm in disbelief of the whole thing. All right. Well, now I'm going to bring into the stream, I'm just going to go through a lot of this information that was covered when Cy Ray was on the Bryan Enton show the other day, and Stephen Olivia Gonzalez, then Christy joined, and they really did the interview. I don't find anything that he says to be dishonest or alarming. Again, as I said, back in the day before the trial on this channel, and I myself personally were so deep into this case. And as far as I know, we were the only, kind of reporting social media or mainstream news outlet that actually had inside sources that were reporting correctly on the case. And those were 2 of Ethan Chapin's fraternity brothers, who to this day, as I reflect, and I don't talk to him that much anymore, as of about, 6 months. Well, basically when Bryan pled, we were in touch every now and then. Something happened about 6 months ago. I did a thing. We spoke a lot at that time. But they're really good people, really good young men now. And as I look back, everything that they told us has proven to be beyond a shadow of a doubt true. If they were stating it as fact, and if they were stating his opinion, it was very well validated and has no, ulterior motive. So I am just going to say that. And I'm proud of that we could represent them and get their truth out and represent the truth, because that's what we're here to do. Hey, Jeff the guitarist, how are you doing? This is all quite a Hail Mary pass by Bryan, and I'm sorry, but he throws like a girl. Kidding. Oh, wait, throwing like a girl. One of the things that Steve Gonzalez says in here about, speaking of throwing like a girl, that's really interesting. He said that there was going to be an expert testifying for the prosecution, because a lot of people say, and I know a lot of you think this, that, he really only had 6 to 8 minutes to go into the house and do what he did and murder those 4 students, get the fuck out of there like a bat out of hell, as we saw his car leaving. But I do believe that's enough time. I think when you are, when you are powered by pathological, by a possibly pathological drive, an urge to do something that you must, fulfill in order to, he was always chasing something that sustained him. Whether it was a drug, whether it was heroin, whether it was a different kind of life, whether it was the grades, whether it was, trying to get the girl that was never going to happen. And I do believe that he is an incel, if not formally, at least in spirit. He's an honorary incel. He has a badge and a little beanie. I know he does. He has an incel beanie, that's for sure. They make some really good points about that. But I think that the adrenaline combined with his determination, plus I don't feel like people understand what they are physically capable of doing in a short period of time. He was exhausted, I'm sure. He got in and out of that house. He was able to take those 4 lives with a 7-inch blade that he had a sharpener to, that I'm sure he used several times just before he went out that night, to 4 sleeping or drunk college students who were not expecting anything but to go to bed and wake up the next morning and study and go home for Thanksgiving. Like, I think it's plenty of time. But anyway, my point was, Steve Gonzalez says they were going to have somebody testify, that there was a video of him apparently that's going to be shown in the trial where he'll tell you here, but in a certain period of time, he threw 162 like hard punches. It was like much less than the time he was in the house. And I think that to me would be pretty compelling evidence if I were a juror, had this actually gone to trial. All right, so let me bring that to the stream. This is sorry I'm doing it like this, but again, I had a little funny medical emergency before the live stream this evening and wasn't able to cue this up another way.
That Bryan Kohberger is guilty, but he has a lot of issues.
Let's see. I just want to, all right. I don't want to do the whole intro here, but just get to the point. All right.
Thank you for being here as always.
So again, this is Cy Ray. He planned to testify on behalf of the defense. He is former law enforcement. He is a forensic data analyst expert of sorts. He is a person a lot of people have very strong opinions about, as it is. Let me know what you think about him based on what he says here.
And I know Olivia is going to join us in a little bit. She's dealing with the baby. But I wanted to continue this conversation from the time you just had on News Nation. And I know, Steve, that you wanted an opportunity, you and Olivia wanted an opportunity to be able to talk to Cy about some of the information that he has, since he was a defense witness for Bryan Kohberger. I just wanted to ask one question before I throw it over to Steve, though, and it kind of plays off some of what you said on News Nation, Cy. You talked about Bryan Kohberger potentially being at the house before. Can you elaborate on that a little more? I mean, are you able to? And I know.
Oh, hey guys, I'm so sorry. Before I get into this, you just reminded me, and hey, catch me if you can. How are you doing? I just have to pull this up because this is good. Whoops. Where'd that go? And welcome to you. Let's see. Amazing Deadman 2461. What happened to innocent of proven guilty? That's right. Well, that's why you go to a trial. And when you decide that you're not going to face a trial because you understand that the evidence stacked against you is so overwhelming that you're not going to have a snowball's chance in hell, you're going to have to eat your ego and a lot of shit. And the outcome might be much worse for you after all, because you might get sentenced to death by a firing squad as opposed to just living out the rest of your life in a concrete block. And you decide to take a plea. Well, that is an admission of your guilt, as Judge Hippler asked him 4 times for each of the individual murders that he committed, plus the burglary, which he attested to. So he proved himself guilty by stating he was guilty and choosing not to sit for a trial with a jury of his peers or in front of a judge. Now, in regards to his point 2 of the 3 points that he's bringing up as part of his post-conviction relief effort, MH says, was there hair in Ethan's grasp that wasn't BK's? I haven't found out if that's true. Well, we do have answers. So here, let me just bring this in super quick, then we'll get right back to this. I just want to make sure I do hit all our points here. Okay. So, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So this is from Ethan Chapin's autopsy report. May that, promising young man rest in peace. All of these lives lost is just a horrific thing. FBI lab item number 2, reference head hair used for microscopic comparison to evidence hairs. FBI lab item number 3, one hair from the right hand, morphologically consistent with the decedent Chapin's own reference hair, morphologically dissimilar to the defendant's reference hair. Now, this is not the only time the hair that was Ethan Chapin's hand was mentioned throughout the discovery. It was raised by that, who's a Brett Turvey guy. If you don't know who I'm talking about, we don't have to go there today, but I'm sure we're going to be revisiting that shit show as we go further into this. Maybe not tonight, but I mean, this whole Bryan Kohberger post-conviction relief situation. There was never more than I think it said slight or scanty strands of hair in Ethan's hand, often characterized as being one strand of hair, sometimes like a small number of strands of hair, never clumps. So that isn't even a thing. It's just, grasping at straws.
No, it's not exact, but are you able to say whether he was actually inside the house?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little bit more responsive on these questions and drag it out a little bit. So if I'm going on and on, stop me.
Yeah, you can do that on this. We have unlimited time, so feel free.
Thankfully.
Yeah,
and 100%. Like, I'll make myself available to the family. By the way, 24/7. Like, if you guys have follow-up questions going forward, by all means. When I heard that you guys wanted to have this conversation, I actually. It meant a lot to me, and I was like, oh, finally, I can talk to the victim's family, because I spent my entire career advocating for victims' families. I've done a lot of stuff with.
Damn it, I'm sorry. Did you guys hear me just talking or not? No. Okay, well, this is the one I wanted to comment on. Then the Beehive, and welcome. Even Bill Thompson states they cannot place BK in the house. And I do know that he said that. And that's information when the prosecutor says it. Certainly people should feel confident that they can rely upon that. But, as it turns out, and this is just my opinion, I know that you may have opinions that differ from mine. Bill Thompson doesn't seem to know his asshole from his elbow. So the fact that he said that and believes that isn't a surprise to me. But yes, you're right. He did say that. But let's listen. I'm going to listen to what Sai has to say here.
Parents of murdered children, and this is a very hard place that it started out trying to be at, and I really appreciate you guys reaching out. And anytime you have questions, I'll give you my direct number. By all means, feel free. You guys can hit me up anytime.
Thank you.
But what I want to cover on that piece is, when we start looking at the house itself, there's a couple different things we can look at. AT&T has a very specific report, and it's called Locdebor. And I know it sounds like a silly word. It's LOCDBOR. Locdebor, and its location database of record. This will include estimated latitude and longitudes, and they range from 25 meters out to 3,000, 30,000 meters, so they can get very big. Historically, there's accuracy issues with this report. So if you just take all.
Okay, now I just want to say what I can say about this Locdebor report. Now, you guys know, some of you from, talking about various cases before I was doing what I did now, I was in site acquisition for telecommunications, and I worked for a friend of mine who had a firm what would happen is if a wireless company needed to expand their network, they would send me the site acquisition analyst out to go find, to go scope out, the area. It used to be we would build brand new towers, and then we would co-locate on towers. Sometimes you'd put antennas on the side of the buildings. I had search scopes that were just a couple city blocks to, like 30 rural square miles or whatever. You'd come up with 3 options. You'd work through all the legal red tape, the ordinances and such, and then you'd find a suitable place for that cellular company to propose to put their equipment to expand their wireless capacity for all their customers, to grow their business, and to give us a call that doesn't drop, or whatever the case may be. Now, some of you who've followed me in the Chris Watts case know that, we had the person who owned the firm that I worked for, who also happened to be a friend of mine prior to that and still is, who is an absolute expert in everything, cellular data analysis. He was able to determine, he and somebody that he worked with on this, that Nicole Kessinger's phone pinged, and I always say it like this, and it's very specific, within under 300 to 400 feet. And sometimes I mistakenly say yard, but it's feet of the Watts home. So what they're saying is they know that she was closer than, at the maximum, 300 to 400 feet. And the reason, they have to give me the information like that and say, based on our analysis, this is what we can tell you with certainty, is because whatever it is that they are looking at, whatever data they are looking at connected to someone's cell phone and, the location services or whatever the case may be, depending on the company, depending on the technology, depending on the sector or niche, and as time goes by, hopefully we can pinpoint these things with a greater degree of accuracy. You're going to know that you're going to be able to pinpoint a location within a certain range. Some of them is, thousands of feet. Some of them is thousands of feet, thousands of yards. Some of them is within now literally just 10 inches. So that's what he's talking about here. And everything he's saying here is absolutely completely legitimate. I know that from being in that industry. Not as well as he knows it, but I can vouch for that.
The data and you throw it on the map and you think that's accurate, you're going to have a lot of problems. A really good example in this case is there's a time when Bryan goes up to Seattle and one of his Loc-de-Boer hits shows him in New Orleans. So that gives you an idea of the accuracy issues. There's 2 factors, and like I said, I'm going to pile on a lot of data for you guys. The next thing that comes into play is the actual handset, the phone itself. iPhone actually restricts a lot of third-party apps and even the mobile carrier to some points of getting precise location data, which a lot of people don't realize. If I try to ping a phone, that phone ping can actually be screwed up by Apple itself to, instead of getting this nice, neat little GPS, I get this 5,000 meter GPS range, and you can be anywhere in that 5,000 meters. Samsung, on the other hand, is a very chatty phone. It's preloaded with all kinds of silly apps and ridiculous.
And with Apple, that is because the leadership of Apple does not believe that it is the government's right to know exactly where their customers are at all times with a great degree of certainty based on their technology. So they scramble it on purpose for that reason, because yes, in business, as we know, there is politics. Samsung, I guess, don't care so much.
Monitoring, if anybody's ever had a Samsung, when you first power that thing up, like there's 100 apps on that thing. It's good for law enforcement because when we get a phone that's a Samsung phone, it's typically very chatty on the network. We're going to see a lot more connectivity. Samsung's also unique that if I do certain things with certain apps that require location data, such as GPS or navigation, that accuracy from the 3,000 or the 5,000 meter ranges come down to 25 meters. And in this particular case, if you look at those precise measurements, there's probably 5 that land directly on what would be the living room of the house. Like the latitude, longitude is the physical house itself. And, if you put the house back on the map and you map those, the hits are inside the house. Now,
I'm going to let you keep explaining. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So, because I haven't heard this before. So you're saying based on the data you saw, the latitude, longitude for Bryan Kohberger's Samsung was in the living room?
The AT&T derived latitude, longitude from the AT&T's network that it estimates a location it lands in the house. And it's a 25-meter range. So, we're talking 75 feet. So it could be anywhere in the house on any floor. It could technically be outside the house. It could be on the property, but it's showing in the immediate area. My personal opinion is when I look at those and I map what's happening before and after, and I'm looking at all the other evidence, I think these are accurate locations. And, that's.
And the other piece of the analysis there that he doesn't mention is even, okay, so if it's within 25 yards, 75 feet degree of accuracy, and say that the, radius of the house is larger than that 25 yards or 75 feet, which could, theoretically put him outside the house. And maybe he was outside the house. Maybe he was never in the house. We do not know that for sure. That's true. It's also, the repetition of the occurrences with that, most accurate measure of a location, given the kind of phone that he had and the technology that, that we have the capability of using. It's the repetition of the showing up within the same range of latitude and longitudinal groupings. Was that what you want? When you're playing darts, you want a good grouping, right? Tight. So think of it like that. It happens again and again and again. You have to also consider what was going on at the house at the time. Was literally nobody there? Was it a break or something? Was he in there all by himself? Oh, that would be weird. Were they having a big party? Was he in there? That would also be weird. Was he just sitting outside looking at them because they were doing their own things? There wasn't a lot going on. That's also weird. No matter how you shake it, it's weird. And it would have been weird for the jury to hear in a trial. And it makes me wonder, wait, why again was this guy testifying on behalf of the defense? Not sure.
And to Steve's point earlier, this is why court, I think, is so critical for this case. That's an argument to be had in front of the jury where the defense would come in and say, hey, you can't reliably say this. And the prosecution would say, here's why. When done right, I feel that they're reliable.
So when you say...
Wait, this is important. I'm sorry. This is important. I'm sorry. I meant to go back to this. MH. Yeah, this is the kicker, right? But once it put him in Louisiana, right, exactly. And depending on, like with Apple, they will scramble. And I personally think, the tech people and the leaders in Apple have a little bit of a sense of humor, and they really do not like the government tracking their customers or them or, citizens of this country, at least, using their technology. So I think they play like punk them a little bit. I don't know if that's really why, or if it's just flaws in the technology that they just can't do anything about. But again, so there will occasionally be these flaws that show up, and this is a known thing. It is very well, stay with me, it's very well tracked and understood. They, an analyst like Cy should, if he's worth his salt, know what the range of error is, and not necessarily in the distance, but in how often does that happen? Because it is a vast minority of the times when somebody's going to try to get a longitudinal measure based off this technology on the phone, where you're in Seattle and they're going to put you in Louisiana. But right, I mean, we can't deny that there is that flaw. So good point. Thank you for bringing that background, MH.
Accurate locations, you mean you believe, based on your expertise, that he was inside the house on previous occasions?
So I'll qualify a handful of things tonight. And again, Steve, any questions that later on, by all means, hit me up. I'm more than happy to pour over anything you want to. One of the things the defense did with me early on in this case is they got outside of the geolocation data and they said, hey, as a former homicide cop, as a homicide sergeant, as a supervisor that supervises these type of investigations, we're interested in anything you can find. And they poured tons of data over. Why that's important too is it's not just the phone stuff. There's a lot of stuff inside the crime scene and things that I reviewed in the crime scene. I 100% believe that the offender, who is Bryan Kohberger, like there's no alternative theory in my head at this point, he's been in the house before. I think there's absolutely no doubt he was familiar with the basic layout of the house. I'm not saying he was intimately familiar with the entire house, but he had a working knowledge of the house. That house is laid out very weird. I've been through the house. The path that was taken, what we see is what occurred in that house, him coming and going from the neighborhood, there's prior knowledge. There's no doubt in my mind that there's.
And what do you guys think about that? I mean, to me, that makes total sense. Everybody knows that 1122 King Road was house that was very active. The people that lived there were very popular, well liked. There'd be a lot of parties. It seemed like there were people in and out of the house, when the girls wouldn't even really necessarily be there. We know that from body cam footage, from police visits about music, volume, and things like that. And also, like I said, I do believe that one person, especially that person being Bryan Kohberger, who had been really working on his fitness, bringing sexy back like honey bun, and is a young, able-bodied male that was very concerned about his fitness. I think he could have, gotten through the house and committed all 4 of those murders in 6 to 8 minutes anyway, but certainly having knowledge of the layout of the house is going to assist him in doing that. And I do personally believe that he certainly would have taken that preemptive step. Being the genius he fancied himself to be, he thought he was going to commit the perfect crime, in my opinion. What do you guys think? Come on, chat. I want to hear what you guys think. And I'm sorry, if I don't agree with you, please don't take it as I'm snapping at you or anything. I'm just, I do have strong opinions on this, and you do too. Or maybe you don't, but if you do, it's okay. But I really very much want to hear what you think.
Prior knowledge. So that also helps support some of this. One thing I want to kind of circle back to, Bryan, and Steve, you'll find this in my report. And it took me weeks to get the defense to allow me to put this in my report. They didn't want me to put it in there. There are third-party databases that collect what is called MAID ID, so mobile advertiser ID. And you guys have all experienced this where you've searched for, I don't know, a pair of shoes. You've Googled a new pair of shoes you think you wanted. And then 2 days later, you're surfing the internet and some ads are popping up for those shoes. That's based on your mobile advertiser ID. It's a unique number, but there's third-party.
And just as a public service announcement, there was legislation that's passed recently where on your mobile device, you should have the option somewhere, and I do not believe it's easy to find, and it's probably for a reason, where you can opt out of having this MAID tracking your every move, system tracking your every move, decision wise and, your physical movements. But until rather recently, when it became a kind of big legal issue and before this legislation was passed, a lot of people didn't even know it was there.
Databases that collect that. And typically when they're collecting that type of information, it gets a latitude, longitude stamp with a timestamp. So we can actually see. Law enforcement can access those databases. You have to have a search warrant. There's a process to go through. In my report, what you'll find is it's towards the very end of it, I actually lay out that, hey, there's more than reasonable suspicion here to believe that this phone has been inside the residence or very close to the residence on these dates. Typical criminal investigation, we would go look at these third-party databases, pull all the mobile advertiser ID data from those dates. Forget the 13th. His phone is off. We're never going to get his phone in or near the house on the 13th, and that's where all the focus is. But if we go back to pattern of life and we pull these other dates leading up to the crime, I feel incredibly confident that they're going to get precise GPS. Now I'm talking 3 meters, so now we're talking less than 10 feet at, around, and very close to the house on those different occasions. The idea that I put this in my report and said, this is the kind of follow-up I would expect to have, and nobody ever, I fully expected as soon as I dropped that report that January, that by February, March, we were going to see discovery on this new data. They didn't even look at it. They didn't even bother.
So here's the thing. Going back to Bill Thompson stating to the public that, and he stated in a very matter-of-fact, definitive way now, didn't he, that he knew that Bryan Kohberger had never been in their house before. Here's the problem with that. And I believe what Ray is saying here, because it seems like the prosecution did this with a number of things that the defense was ready to make really strong, zealous arguments about. Could Bryan Kohberger have legitimately walked free? We don't know, because the prosecution was not prepared to appropriately prosecute this man. I just simply do not believe that. I don't think it was necessarily a problem in the investigation, in my opinion, and I could be wrong. I wasn't there. I wasn't on the FBI behavioral analysis team. I wasn't, sitting in the district attorney's office. I get it. But, he's saying, and this isn't the only example of this, that he put out these reports in the discovery saying, I, as an expert on behalf of the defense, who is going to go on the stand and testify under oath on the behalf of the defense, this is the data that I had. This is how I analyzed it. And this is the conclusion I came to. Read, this is what I'm going to testify to. How the state did not go, oh, fuck. And like, while they're saying to the public, we know Kohberger has never been in their house. We know he's never been in their house. How they did not scurry when that fire was lit under their ass to get their own experts to look at that same data and see how their analysis panned out is really, really confounding. And to me, it's a failure in the system of justice and a failure to prosecute perhaps one of the worst, most violent criminal offenders in Idaho in a very long time. Not okay.
With it. It's incredible.
If they looked at it, they wouldn't have understood it. We heard that in court when they were talking about a JSON file and how you can edit it and how like that was some kind of weird anomaly. It's like, that's what the file's for. That's what you use it for. I mean, it was very confusing to the audience, but the lack of knowledge inside that courtroom at certain times was very frustrating to me. And I mean, I wouldn't hire my own people. I would Shadow Dragon. I've said it multiple times. They have OS lint. They were like, Steve, the same emails they're using in this court case are the same emails we're tracking back to your children. But we're not doing it for free. They weren't like a Cyray. They're like, I think there was a 30K. Don't quote me on that, but I that's what my mind wants to tell me. It was like a 30K. And they said, we're not giving it up on a case this big. We keep doing, because we're highly in demand. We're not going to take a case this big and not get stiffed with the payment. We're not making that message. But they literally said, we can literally tell you that he's been connected to these people through his fingerprint of his emails and the things that he was doing online. It's a whole science that they have out there and touch points, and they put it all together. He was very confident, and he said they're refusing to give me any money. They want to do it for free. And to that point, the Cellbrite, the Barnharts ended up didn't have to do it, but they did it for free, just like Cyray. So there was these decisions being made, not over the right decision. It was, I don't know what it was, but evidence was being missed in a case that the world was watching, and we can do better. We can learn from our mistakes, and we can do better, and that's why we're here right now.
And you know, Steve, if you think about it, let's push that price up to 50K. When you look at the amount of money that was spent on this investigation and bang for the buck, spend the 50K. It's probably the best you're going to spend on this case, because it's going to show that I think those concrete connections. I do have a question. I think you guys might be interested in this. I believe that the girls went to the A&W. There's a little A&W and a little store.
I know exactly. Yeah, right down the street.
I think this was a pretty routine thing that they hit on a regular basis. And I'm really curious to some of the background there. But one thing that I've always said is missing, and it's really bothered me. Has anybody ever approached you guys on what's called VICAP? Have you ever heard that word VICAP? Or it's basically a history of the victims to everything of where they shop. If they order pizza, where they order pizza. Has anybody ever approached you in this investigation to try to?
Closest we got to they were scared. Once I hired a lawyer, they just stopped talking to me. And my lawyer said they'll answer questions, but to the point of they're not going to be witnesses, because they didn't want the gag order to fall over. I told my lawyer, I want the ability to speak on behalf of my child. If anything comes to the point where they're going to put a gag on me, then they can't talk to me. And I had nothing to hide. It was just, you're not going to control me like an asset.
So here, I just want to read a couple of these comments and say, Sirius Black says, I was very leery about Cyray after watching him on different shows, but I am sort of leaning towards him being truthful now. And then the Beehive said that something about Cyray, and I asked, why do you think that? And the response was, and thank you for answering, Cyray was a defense expert in data analysis for geomapping, but he is now talking out of his ass because he is not a forensic scientist, unlike Professor Brent Turvey. Oh, Professor Brent Turvey. I'm not even going to touch that right now, but he was going to be a defense expert in data analysis for geomapping. And in my opinion, the data that he is giving us the analysis on has very much to do with geomapping. Now, this is just my opinion again, because this is a conversation and they're talking about things outside the scope of what he was going to testify on. they even just like say that outwardly, acknowledge it. He's engaging in that discussion, but where I feel and I was on the fence about him too. And the person that I used to work for in the site acquisition firm also had opinions about this person. He's interacted with him before. I've talked about this in previous live streams. We're not going to go into it now, but maybe we'll revisit some other day if you guys are curious for me to regurgitate that sort of sloppy mess. There's a couple stories, but I think this is just my opinion again. So, it's confusing why he was going to be a defense expert. And now what he's saying is, bolstering the position of the defense. Well, from everything I have heard him say, watched interviews with him, but also seen the data analysis that he is putting out, in my mind, to me, it looks like the data analysis that he is talking about is objectively the same, whether he was talking to people when he was going to be a defense expert before the plea, and as he is talking now in retrospect. I personally believe, and I think he alludes to this a little bit, it seems to me that after he got into, this case and he was retained by the defense as an expert to testify on the stand, and he did do the data analysis, and he felt a little bit uncomfortable with what he found and how he was going to reconcile it, presenting it factually in a court of law as a defense expert, because in my opinion, the data that he is analyzing is not in support of Bryan Kohberger's innocence. Does that make sense? And you might have a different opinion, and I'm going to stop saying kumbaya, kumbaya, but that's just how I'm reading it.
I'm going to speak on my daughter's behalf, or I'm going to jail, one or the other. So, yeah, we never got there. We got to the passwords. We got to usernames. They hit Olivia up. Olivia got into the cloud ID. Like, Olivia hacked. It's fake. Like, we know the passwords.
I knew my sister's password on her Apple device, but it was two-factor authentication. So it would send a code to her device, and they wouldn't. And still to this day, they've not handed over her phone because they say that they can't get into it. But regarding VICAP, and I apologize if I got that wrong, no, we've never ever heard that. We've never been familiar with that at all.
You would remember it's about almost 300 questions, and it's a deep dive in any information. And this has nothing to do with the gag order. There's no.
And that would have been part of a comprehensive investigation that would have looked into victimology, that would have helped determine with a greater degree of certainty if Bryan Kohberger had actually interacted with the victims prior to, the events of November 13th or not. But again, in my opinion, this is my view on it. And I am like, never have a dog in the fight. I'm like, the evidence, I'm like a horse with blinders on. I'm like, the evidence, it's at the finish line. And I follow it. We get to the finish line. Here we are. Guilt or innocence, or I don't fucking know, or total corruption. It can be anything in between, of course. But just looking at, at the evidence here, and quite frankly, because I do believe that Bryan Kohberger is guilty, I don't so much care what the defense did, because I feel like most of us had Ann Taylor's number from the beginning. But where the prosecution failed to do these comprehensive but very simple, holistic assessments of the victims, to add the science of victimology into the equation to determine the relationship or not between Bryan Kohberger and the victims prior to the crime. I mean, that was a huge fucking oversight. And that, as a behavioral therapist, I can say that that is something that really should always be included in, solving a crime or understanding a crime. Or, when we're seeking justice, we're not just, jail or you get to walk free, right? It's like, we don't want these horrible things to continue to happen again in our society. That's why we have a justice system, and understanding human behavior, human motivation, relationship dynamics, and how, that amalgamation of all those things can, end up in such a horrific, grotesque, egregious tragedy, is something we need to understand if we are like, hey, as a society, we are going to take on the responsibility of addressing crime, preventing crime, trying to reduce crime, and, hopefully ultimately also, rehabilitating people who have committed crimes. But to not do things like this survey that he's talking about, especially when there's multiple victims in such a horrible crime where the motivation is unclear, is just like, you got go back to kindergarten or retire, Bill Thompson.
They wouldn't do that. The reason I'm asking is there's certain things that would come out in their normal pattern. Like, hey, if they ran to the convenience store, what convenience store would they run to? Is it kind of if they met friends or everybody was going, is there a place that they would converge? And we're getting back into the reliability of the GPS. So I don't want to get too far out of breath saying I know this happened, but there are multiple times that the device, Kohberger's device, is in the area of the house, and then it moves to the parking lot of that A&W root beer. At the same time, multiple residents of the house go to the A&W root beer. So there's times where I can actually see and that to me, that's what we call a collision. It's one thing to have devices in a general area, but when we see the two devices track together to a point and then track back, that's incredibly telling. So, the idea that nobody has come back to you guys and said, hey, let's talk about the A&W or some of the other friends it's just mind-blowing. So I can't agree with you enough. It needs to be changed. That's why I took this case.
I want to focus on that a little bit, and then the Beehive again says, but this all starts with Ann Taylor. She totally gave up in the end. And I hope you don't mind, Beehive. I'm not trying to pick on you, but you know that. But I think your thoughts on this and then what I'm thinking as I'm reading this, I think it's, it encompasses a lot of what, most of the people who have been following this case and feel strongly about it believe. See, how I see it is, okay, it all starts with Ann Taylor. She totally gave up in the end. I don't think she gave up in the end. I think she fought like, a dog with a bone until there was no more fight to be had. Because all the fight that Ann Taylor had in her, and she did, I think she absolutely zealously advocated for her client, for Bryan Kohberger. I think she actually does, strangely enough, in my mind, believe in his innocence. But whether she did or not, it shouldn't matter. As a defense attorney, I think she zealously advocated for him. And that is what we need first and foremost out of a defense attorney, right? But I think she fought like hell. I think she fought like a fucking ninja champ until there was no more fight to be had. Because all the fights that she was forging were for the court to keep out incriminating evidence that I do believe the defense of Bryan Kohberger had great fear, and I believe for good reason, would not even convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, but just, I just feel like it was like almost no contest. I believe the evidence against him was overwhelming. When all of the fights that a zealously advocating attorney should vehemently fight to keep that evidence that is so damaging, bad, horrible, devastating facts for your client out of the case, that evidence will not be admitted. Judge Hippler just kept going, denied. I think she arrived at a point where there was no more fight to fight. And it was just, the cards were on the table. But again, that's just my opinion.
I'm hoping in any pain and trauma that I've caused you guys, I can't apologize. And I feel my sincerest respect and condolence on this thing. I couldn't imagine being in your guys' situation, having to go through this. And now it coming full circle back. But at the same time, when I first looked at this case, my initial thought was this can never be the standard investigation that we see on cases like this. This can never be acceptable. Brian and I were talking before you guys jumped on. After the plea deal, I actually, and against the defense, Ann was incredibly upset with me for doing this, but I've created a 1 day debrief that I've been going around the country for free, providing to law enforcement. And for you guys, hopefully this helps a little bit. We've had an incredible response from law enforcement. The service you guys got on this case, the average law enforcement agency is appalled by. Since November, when I started teaching this course, we've had 300 agencies throughout the United States attended. So it's resonating. We're getting a lot of endorsement of, yes, we need to change these things. But it's really interesting to look at that, just how much fell through the cracks on this case.
So I have a quick question, and I hope that it comes across the right way. So my question is separating the murders and the burglary from the stalking. And as we know, the state never picked up stalking charges, but the FBI currently still has an active investigation. Do you think that some of those things were not picked up by the state because of this separation? Or do you think that this would have been something that would not have driven a charge, or would not have been evidence of a charge that they were not actively pursuing?
I am guessing, this is my opinion of it, things that I've seen. I'm happy sharing this opinion to whoever, but there's a lot that needs to be filled in for it to land where I say 100% this is what's happening. I'm about 90% here. They back themselves into a corner, into a no-win situation, because the problem the FBI has with stalking right now is they cannot prove stalking in the work product that they do. It'll never hold up in court. In fact, I don't think a federal prosecutor would even take the case. So that's why we haven't seen the FBI proceed with that. Does the FBI have information right now, or potentially the ability to go get information to prove that case? 100%. But their problem that they have—
tell me what that would be.
well, it'd be that mobile advertiser ID. It would be mapping all of the AT&T records and looking at the pattern of life of Bryan over 6 months, where we see these routine travel patterns. We can see where he's going, what he's doing, how long he's stagnating there. Understanding pattern of life is everything for this case. The problem the FBI has is, to make that stalking case, they're going to have to disclose or discover new evidence that never came out from the state of Idaho. And now you have these competing cases where you have a case that allegedly went.
So I believe what he's saying is the FBI cannot pursue a stalking case because, let's face it, the FBI can prove that every single person in this country is a bunch of motherfucking stalkers because they know everything we do. And all of us have a little bit of weird behavior every now and then, right? Maybe could be considered approaching stalking or all the way into the red zone. I'm kind of like being funny about that, but they can't, in a trial, put forth the evidence that they are able to obtain as the all-powerful, godly, divinely bestowed FBI, because we're not supposed to know that they're doing that. We're not supposed to know that they've granted themselves the ability to supersede the Constitution, to be up everyone's ass at all times, whether or not they're committing a crime or not. Now, how you feel on that is, of course, your own opinion, but it is a little eerie, right? So I think that's, the reason the FBI can't pursue the stalking. I think he's about to say the evidence that the lazy, sloppy prosecution failed to bring to the table and try to admit as evidence in the trial, should there have been one, or even include in the discovery, would not have, been the linchpin to prove that he was stalking. The FBI could have done it because they did their work, and they also exploit the rights of the citizens in this country. Double-edged sword, right? But the prosecution was both lazy and incompetent and just didn't have the goods to, close the deal. Does that make sense?
Through the entire process of discovery and never produced the evidence that's needed. And now for a federal case to all of a sudden say, oh, by the way, here's this other evidence, they've painted themselves into a corner that they can't explain.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I feel like there's two discoveries, because I've actually heard almost everything that you've said already, that he was in that house, even waited in certain locations for like extended periods of time of no movement. This wasn't the only house that he stalked. There was like a loop that he was following, and there was a couple other places that he basically stood still for a certain amount of time. Just telltale signs that this person wasn't shopping, and they cross-correlated to bank records and the ATMs and all that stuff. They had some stuff, the basic old school investigations they had down, but the technical was almost like they outsourced it to the FBI. And then when the FBI were like, we're not so sure that our discovery is your discovery, or our investigation is your investigation, that there was these huge gaps in it. And when they went to go to make a case, it wasn't so clear. So as a father, I'm like, I'll fill in the gaps if I can, especially when it comes to technology. And It was an eye opener. It was so frustrating to sit there with a guy who looks like Santa Claus who has his consciousness, his short-term memory on a piece of paper and has no clue about technology, never will. And there's 4 lives in the balance. It's just scary.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, this is a big problem with the FBI. The FBI has a habit of coming in on these cases. And where the problem happens is the FBI has access to things they can't get into court properly. They can't lay the foundation the way that state courts require. But they still proceed. The IGG, I will tell you, the investigative genetic genealogy on this case is overlooked at how impactful it was. As soon as they made the decision to go with investigative genetic genealogy, this case was doomed from an ethical perspective because they had to go outside of policy. They had to hide things. And now once they got the hit, you can see it clear as day. The rest of the investigation is how do we hide the IGG? Because we don't ever want to talk about the way that.
Now, when that IGG, evidence and information came out that connected, they got the DNA from Bryan Kohberger's dad, connecting it to the DNA in the knife sheath, saying that the person they connected it from, that they collected the DNA from, which was his dad, must be the biological father of the person whose DNA was left on the knife sheath. Even in that documentation, it was acknowledged because it would have been such blatant corruption to not do so had it been uncovered, which it very well could have been during the trial, that the FBI, in order to even utilize and work the IGG, had to utilize certain loopholes that were not of the legal avenue. I mean, that is just a fact of the case. And that is a fact that could have been very difficult to get over. I think this is a really good point. But at the end of the day, the troubling thing is you have that you could, that, with, what was it, like 51, what was the number? It was in like that ridiculous number with like 13 zeros. I can't remember what it was. I've never used it before. I didn't even know I'd ever heard it before. Octillion? I don't know. 1 in 51, whatever. I'm going to call it octillion. We're just going to go for it. If I'm wrong, screw it. Everybody do a shot. 1 in 51 octillion ratio likelihood that it was Bryan Kohberger's DNA who was on the knife sheath over any other human being on the earth. And with the statistic that they provided, guess what? Any other human being that has ever lived over the history of humanity. That's not circumstantial. That's just, you fucking did it. Or at least it was your DNA on the knife sheath. And then we can ask a lot of questions from there. I guess we go with that. So yeah, the IGG was always going to be a huge problem because the FBI representative who built the IGG profile, and if you remember, that didn't even come out, that it was an FBI agent who was the one building the profile for the investigative genetic genealogy research until it was compelled out in court. And then at that point, it was like, well, the most incriminating piece of evidence is fruit of a poisonous tree. And I don't know how that was going to, it would have been very interesting from a, legal procedure perspective to see how that was worked out if this had gone to trial. Or I don't know, if Bryan Kohberger gets his Christmas morning, maybe it will go to trial.
Me, as an old school investigator, that drives me crazy is Bryan Kohberger's vehicle and his name are setting in a report that entire time. All they had to do is follow up and get a sample of his DNA. If they would have done that and stopped trying to rely or over rely on this technology of the IGG produced, I think this is a completely different case. But they crossed the line with IGG. They knew they crossed the line, and everything we see after that is nothing more than a smokescreen trying to hide what actually happened to identify him.
I'll go a step further.
But here's the thing. It is my opinion, the FBI would not have had the need to feel like they should or would. I guess maybe they always feel like they could because they're the FBI, cross the line. But with the possibility of making that most critical evidence inadmissible in court, if and I don't want to put on the investigators. I just, I think this, I don't know, but in my mind, all of the evidence pointing to Kohberger was there without having to go the IGG route. I mean, they had the car. He had been pulled over. They had his cell phone. They were able to pull the phone records. The phone records, I mean, in my opinion, if I were on that jury, I don't know if I could say reasonable doubt with the pattern of behavior that his phone records showed. And then so many more things, the verification from Amazon that Bryan Kohberger purchased a K-bar knife months before the murders. And yes, it was definitely him. The dumbass purchased it with a gift card that he purchased with his debit card. And he had it delivered to his front door in Pennsylvania, dumbass. He also purchased a sheath, identical to the one that was found on Madison Mogen's bed, partially under her body, partially under a blanket, and covered with blood in part, having blood on it in part, and also containing his DNA on it. And also in that same purchase, he bought a sharpener just for good measure. And then after the crime, when he took that crazy route, and I've always said, I made a couple of videos about it, that there was something that was a little missing, that he very clearly went down to the Snake River and disposed of that knife. I think they touch on it here, and apparently there is phone data evidence of that now. I don't think that's like something that I was the only one that thought that up, but we were pretty sure about it here from the beginning. They could have easily found out through the investigation that this person with this car that they were looking for, whose cell phone number they had because he had been pulled over, lived in, an apartment at Washington State University. Now let's bring in, guys, we can't forget the civil suit that's going on. Families Against University of Washington and their representatives for the abundance of alarming red flags, sirens going off, like bomb. You should have been hiding under a desk, on your knees with your hands over your head, like it was a fucking nuclear bomb drill. Bryan Kohberger's behavior and his pattern of behavior with his classmates, his peers, the professors, and everybody related to his program and his doctoral pursuit of criminology at Washington State University. I mean, if he was like basically wearing like a reflective vest to school every day saying, hey, don't you think I'm your top suspect? Like, look at my behavior. I don't think they needed to go to IGG. I just wish that they did a more comprehensive job in putting together all the pieces. What, those schools are 8 miles from one another? It couldn't have been that hard. I mean, what do I know? I'm not in law enforcement. I'm not a district attorney, but there's just sadness in how this all went down. Mostly for these people right here. I'm talking about the families, obviously.
And be careful with this. I wish my lawyer was here. The IGG was done in a scripted fashion of it works. We know how it does. They told me, the people that I've been around said, if we get it tossed out, it led to the dad. It never led to BK. And that's by design. It never goes to him. It goes to his father in the trash, established the law, and then we got a warrant and we got the cheek swab. We got it down. IGG is not going to ever be in court because it's a tip, and this is established standard, and we're not going to let a little podunk Moscow make court law or state law or any kind of law. This is never going to get into a courtroom because we have these established practices, and that is what it is. And, if you call a tip on a black SUV that you've seen that has some kind of explosives in it and something, and you want to give that tip, well, that doesn't go into court either. So I get where they're going with it, and the greater good. I'm just a dad trying to make sure that my daughter in the system gets better, but I do see some red flags, and I know we had the right guy, and we just made it all difficult for everyone. We just made it so difficult for everyone because nobody knew what they were doing.
And I think that's such a good point. I just want to say hi, Molly McMom. And Molly McMom is an alumni of Washington State University. And she's saying Washington State University wanted nothing to do with it. He was on written notice by Washington State University. And that's right. But you know what the problem is, above and beyond the actual notice that he was given and the disciplinary and punitive measures that were, that were enacted upon him due to his, we're just going to give it a broad label of behavior while he was there, are the documented discussions, the context, the nature, the degree of concern that overrode all of those discussions between the faculty and staff at Washington State University when they knew he was a problem, with this one professor saying, mark my words, if we don't do something about it now, someday he becomes like a professor and has this power, he's going to be, the next serial killer we read about, or something to that matter. I know I botched that up a little bit, but the thing is, the people that he was working with, these professors in the doctoral program at Washington State University, many of them were doctors of criminal justice themselves. There are people who are in part, it would have been good if they threw a behavioral therapist in there, because they'd be like, oh, I don't think so, honey. We're going to pull this all back, scholarship or whatever, let him sue us. We're going to throw him back in the pond. He's an 8-eyed fish. Get rid of him. But anyway, there were people that had a degree of intense training and skill development and identifying the qualities of the most pathological human beings and minds among us, who turn into those who commit the most heinous offenses, which are studied by criminology and handled through the criminal justice system. So we have doctors of this art and process and institution within our society who should be among the most trained in identifying these indicators of the pathologies that let you know this person is a risk. This person is not within the normal range of potentiality to harm. They are on the extreme. And this is what we then consider a crisis. No, they recognized it. They talked about it and documented communications, and they still allowed it to happen under their wing, in their rooms, in their own home, out of fear that they would throw him out for good cause and he was going to sue them for a couple $100,000 because he lost his scholarship. I mean, that is also unacceptable. And I hope that these families win the civil suit against, Washington State University. No offense to the university. I'm sure it's a lovely university. If it was any university, I'd say the same, and its representatives, because we need to do better. And when we are professionals, when we are the most highly trained professionals in a field that exists for the sole purpose of, understanding crime, motive, and reducing threat to society, and we can't get this right, then there's no question after that. It's simply not acceptable, and there needs to be accountability.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it's difficult for people to grasp that we can stand behind his guilt, but not understand or agree with everything that the prosecution and state did.
Right.
And it makes it difficult for us to be put in a position where we are having to defend the state's case that we don't fully understand. And there's a lot of missing pieces for us. And that's the only way that we can justify his guilt. So it puts us in a difficult position of being like, man, you guys are really making us fight for your work that you did, that you yourself won't stand behind. That's a conversation that we have a lot as a family.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, Steve, with what you said, and I hate to put it in these terms, but it summarizes exactly what you said. The end result justifies the means, right? It doesn't matter how we get to him through IGG, because we have all of these bailout plans that we feel we can protect ourselves. Anytime law enforcement takes the idea or the process or the methodology that the end result can justify the means, we're in trouble. Because what happened with that is they created the situation, they realized how impactful it was now, and now the next 4 months of investigation is nothing more than trying to hide what they did at the beginning. And that's why we see the phone records were never analyzed, because they didn't need the phone records. The phone records for AT&T were nothing more than a smokescreen so that they could say, oh, look, we got this tip, we followed up on the phone, we found this, and oh, that led us over here. The phone records were never gathered as a true investigative tool because they already have the narrative written. And whatever aligned with that narrative because of IGG, they brought in, and anything that contradicted that narrative, they eliminated. A really good point on this is they committed in the first search warrant to Bryan driving east on 270. Everything, and it repeats itself, on 50 different search warrants that he traveled east on 270. Bryan Kohberger was never on Highway 270 that night, ever.
And that's where I believe the investigation made an assumption when he took the route home that they couldn't, kind of figure out once they caught his car on cameras in Pullman and then in Moscow. He figured, well, if you're taking a route to evade cameras, it must be this route. But they stated it as fact when apparently they didn't know for sure. And guess what? They could have known for sure using the kind of technology this IRA is speaking about right now. And just about, I think the 100 people in his class, Molly and MH, I think that, it was a very small doctoral candidate cohort, but the undergraduate criminal justice major of the university was around 100. So it could be potentially 100 students seeking their undergraduate degree in criminal justice, correct? Yes, I think that's what it was. I don't know why I had to chime in on that, but just my 2 cents.
He took a route north of the airport. He actually crossed 95 north of Moscow, and then he dropped back down south on the east side of Moscow. And that's why he ends up on Indian Hills, is he actually came from the east. And he did that because he's smart enough to know about the cameras. What drove me crazy in this case is when you see him go back. And by the way, the reason he went south is he panicked. Dylan saw him. He saw Dylan. Reasonable minds would say 911 is being called. And you can see in the video when he leaves, he's leaving in a hurry. If he drives back that same route, he's driving towards where Moscow PD is responding from. He's going to go right back towards the police department. So he has to go down south. When you look at 6 months worth of his records, he doesn't have activity down south. He doesn't know 95 south of Moscow. So he gets about 12, 13 miles outside of Moscow. He pulls over. There's a good gap there, which has always been a concern to me, where he sits there for probably 10 minutes. He powers his phone back on. He goes into navigation mode, and we see the route back.
It's crazy dark too. So the audience might not know what it's like out here in Idaho. You get out in that farm community, there's no lights. We don't have. It's dark as anything. Your headlights are all you have, and high grass. So it gets. If you're not prepared for that, you're not going to be able to figure out where you're going. And without a phone, if that's your primary source of navigation, you're driving around like an idiot, for a certain amount of time.
Well, then, like I said, we've got 6 months of records. I've got a mapping system. I can put everything in there. I can hit a play button, and I can watch his phone for 6 months going around the map. What you see that morning of him coming back to Pullman, you never see in the prior 5 months of records. That's the first time he's ever done that route. And then within 48 hours, he's doing the exact same route again. And that's the last time you'll see him do that. You give me the layest of lay jurors, I can connect the dots there to have them see exactly what's happening. And right after he completes that route, he goes down to Lewiston, right down to the Snake River. He's there for less than a minute or two, and then he's right back to Pullman. Like, what's happening? Of course we know what's happening. I'm with you guys on the frustration. My apologies. Like, you guys should never have been in that situation. this is an FBI issue, and I'll frame this piece. I don't put this out publicly very often. When the plea deal was reached, I contacted the FBI CAS team, and I actually told them, hey, I did a lot of the investigation here. I know what the cross-examination that you guys were going to be subjected to looks like. You name your place, I'll fly to you anywhere in the country, and I will give you the full debrief of what I saw on my side and how we could get better. They never returned my call. So, even reaching out saying, I'll give you as much insight.
Now, that was a little presumptuous of him to do that. But if that is true, I mean, what better could be learned to, improve, investigative techniques and, and prosecuting the most horrific criminals among us than having those two sides that would have been at trial, the state and the defense, presenting the data that they looked at. Presumably much of it was the same, how they analyze it and what they concluded. I mean, that is how we move forward. That's how we learn to correct our mistake. That's how we refine our thinking and our technology so it's more accurate and reliable. And if the FBI did decline that, that just sort of sucks. I don't know. Or maybe not. Or maybe they just thought he was a cocky bastard. I don't know. What do you think?
Insight from the defense perspective of this to be better prepared next time. They're just not interested. And the other thing that I will tell you guys just drove me crazy. Now that my report's out, your guys' last name is all over that report because I did an inventory. I put in, hey, here's what the phones were provided. And then I listed the phones by last names. The only last names in my report that were redacted are the FBI agents that worked on this case. So all of the victims' last names are in this report that went out to the public with the last 4 digits of their phone, but the FBI agents get their last name redacted? Like, what is that? That is insane.
It's been happening a lot. It's really,
if you off record, if you ever want to know about some of the worst, we'll let you know, but I won't propagate them here publicly.
I just want to go back for a second to something you said, Sai. So with the A&W, which is that gas station right down the road from the house.
But I just want to say,
oops, mapped his phone and all.
A little bit late based on what Olivia just said, but I wish she would propagate it publicly because, come on, give us the scoop. We want to know the dirt. What do we need to be fighting here so we can, find a better system of justice? So, monsters, like, in my opinion, well, no, I'm not even getting my opinion anymore. He's admitted to what he's done. He's a monster. He's Satan spawn. So Satan spawns like Bryan Kohberger don't take advantage like of families like yours in the way that they did ever again. I hope they tell us everything they know eventually, just for, the sake of information to know where we have to push for improvement in this, institution of democracy and justice that we are all bound to, whether it's going in the wrong direction or not,
Also, was it the victims' phones at the same time there?
Correct. And there's movement where they're all in the area of the house before that. And then we see it pop up over by the A&W, but they're together. They're at least mapping, and they're mapping not the exact same lat longs. They're just slightly off, but they're within meters of each other, which is, for me, that's a tall tale sign that we're getting better accuracy, because sometimes the system will default if there's a problem with the system and everybody will get the same lat long ping for like a 5,000 meter radius, but all of the lat longs are identical. In this case, they're just slightly different. They're just a couple meters apart, and it's a pattern.
And now, if that is true, and this was part of the discovery before trial, because this was the analysis, this was the conclusion of the data and its analysis that Cy Ray here performed on behalf of defense. So this information was made privy to the prosecution. So without them utilizing their own experts to look at that same data and do their own analysis and come to either the same or a different conclusion, and then, on their merits, contest the points or where they do not agree, how dare they say that we know that there was no interaction between Kohberger and these victims prior to the murders? And how dare they say they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he didn't stalk them? Because that goddamn sounds like stalking behavior to me. If somebody's consistently ending up within a few meters of me and I don't know them and they are fucking creep ass bitch like Bryan Kohberger, I'm just going to say that's either a really crazy coincidence or they're stalking me because I'm not choosing to be around them. And I don't think Maddie and Kaylee were choosing to be around him. You get what I'm saying there? I'm just at first when people were really bumming on the prosecution, I just didn't know what to think. I was just reserving my judgment and kind of felt gross about it, but was hoping that they did their best. Like I believe all human beings essentially do most of the time. But with everything we've learned at this point, unfortunately, I can no longer say that. And it's just unfortunate. I mean, unfortunate's the understatement of the day, but it fucking sucks.
It happens multiple times. There's also an incident, and it was the second, I'm going to screw these dates up, but I can give them to you guys later if it's important. It was the first weekend after school started, and I believe it was Kaylee and Maddie went to Pullman, and I believe there was some type of a sorority, maybe fraternity party, and it's in the apartment complex right next to Bryan Kohberger's apartment. And at one point, Bryan Kohberger's phone moves over to that apartment complex as well. And that's rare. He doesn't typically hang out in that complex. But this is all the way going back in August, that first weekend after school started, the phones intersect in Pullman.
Yeah, the prosecution was doing the exact same thing. They were trying to take his phone activity and cross-correlate it with the other people in the family. They wanted to know who was in the house at a certain time because they wanted to plan the route to who was in there because they were trying to figure out who was the after. And Olivia can tell you the exact day that Kaylee moved in there. I think you said it was like May.
Yeah, into the King Road house. She did move in May.
Yeah, so other people speculated there was no one in the house or only Maddie was in the house. We've never tried to play the blame game. We don't care about that. Who's to blame is BK, and we're holding him accountable. None of the victims. Like another thing I appreciate you saying is no cleanup. We've really chased that down because I mean they're literally driving these young girls to the point of they don't have a life anymore. So you're not true crime anymore. You're speculation, Hollywood fan fiction crap. And I would love for true crime to get back on focus and say, how do we make the world a better place? How do we make sure that people are coming together to actually have less murders and mass murders every single year? That's something we should work towards, not this fan fiction stuff. I mean,
so he's talking about people still, suspecting the roommates are somehow involved. And regardless of prior conversations I may have had with some people, I'm not going to go into this the way I was. But, all I do have to say is if anybody out there still has questions as to why Bethany and Dylan behaved the way that they did after, what they believe they saw that night before and their behavior after, I'll put the video in the description. I made a video about, the 5 responses that we know through tried and true, accurate, replicable, verified studies that human beings have 5 quintessential reactions that are involuntary. They are of the parasympathetic nervous system to extreme shock, trauma, and stress. And we also know with those quintessential reactions when, your conscious mind is taken over by, your more, I don't know. Your more animalistic fundamental self as a human being. Our greatest drive is to survive. And part of that is to be able to deal with, to get through, to however you have to, shock and trauma and, things that, are so horrible, they could either really or legitimately in the psychology of a human being threaten your mere survival. So there's 5 very distinct ways that people handle that from an evolutionary, adaptive perspective. And the way that these 2 girls behaved after what they saw and what they were concerned about and everything, falls right in line with that. Not in theory, but as we do actually anecdotal studies of people that dealt with extreme shock, trauma, or stress, not in consciously working through it, but as their bodies were taken over by the parasympathetic nervous system in the name of human survival. It falls right in line. And if you have any questions about, their potential involvement in the murders after that, give me a call and we'll talk.
So that's part of the reason why we're here today. This is why we've been so dedicated. That's why we made a charity. This is why we have Murder Has a Name. We're doing everything in these girls and these victims' names, Ethan as well, and make sure that the world's a better place. Really, it's just the world's a better place when this is said and done.
Yeah.
You said no cleanup, Ty. I mean, right? That you
there's no, he was in and out. We're talking minutes. And, I'm limited on some of this information. There was some reenactments that I know were done. And the reenactments, this crime could clearly be carried out by a single individual, and it's 5 to 6 minutes. And if push ever.
No, so what Steve Gonzalez was saying when he was saying we have to do better, it was he just very briefly was talking about the trauma and the horrific experience that the surviving roommates have been through. And, and people are still, trying to make them guilty in this crime. They're trying to implicate them and, somehow being part of the planning or the conspiracy or the commission of these murders or the cover-ups. That's what he was specifically saying. And if you're part of that discussion and you're out there talking about true crime and that's what you're doing, get yourself fucking back on track, because that's not what you're doing. You're bullying and exploiting, and this is ridiculous. And, I'm going to say my opinion on this is not something that I keep quiet. I agree with them.
Came to shove, and that had to be proven in court. I know there's video out there of the reenactments. Like, there is no doubt that this is a single offender. But on that point, and I think what you guys are hitting at, it's frustrating to see is, Turvey wants to say that there's cleanup because of things that are absent. Basically, there's things that aren't in a bathroom, therefore it's indicative of cleanup. There's no evidence of what that bathroom looked like before or after. Like, if we start building a case on that type of speculation, Bryan Kohberger's going to walk, right? That's just absurd. And I felt a deep obligation to call Turvey out. And, I'm going to piece something together for you guys. And I've been on the fence if I should voice this, but I think it's the right thing to do. So if I get in trouble later on, so be it. Don't get caught up in what I believe is a very rehearsed scam that is happening right now. If you look at what's happened over the last 3 months, let me help you guys connect some dots. Brett Turvey gets with Whitcomb, who's another idiot. Like, the guy who's never investigated a homicide is going to be the armchair quarterback that's going to change this thing, right? So Turvey and Whitcomb partner up. Turvey becomes very outspoken about this. And what does Ann Taylor do? She publicly reprimands him and issues this cease and desist. If you think about what Turvey's saying Bryan Kohberger is innocent, that this is a big conspiracy, that there's other people. I mean, he goes as far as saying Dylan is potentially involved. How absolutely absurd. Yet Ann Taylor reprimands him from proclaiming BK's innocence. I come out with a book. I go around to law enforcement. Ann knows. I told her I was going to go teach law enforcement. I have been very, very clear. I've always thought Bryan Kohberger is guilty. I think in 10 out of 10 courts in America convict this kid. Every single time we go to court, he gets convicted. The question is, does all the evidence come in because of some of the ways that the evidence was managed, which is a whole different conversation. But I am very outspoken that Bryan Kohberger is the guy. Why hasn't Ann issued a letter to me about breaching my NDA or all this stuff? I will argue any day of the week. What I am saying is way more detrimental to the defense's case than what Brian Turvey said, or Brent Turvey. And she did the one with Turvey. If you guys look at the picture, and here's the critical dates. The Thursday before the plea deal, Ann says in open court, Your Honor, I can't effectively represent my client if I don't get the continuation. So you have the primary attorney on this case saying in open court, it's one of the last statements she made before the plea deal, I cannot effectively represent my client. Those are not small words for an attorney to say in open court. And then
I wouldn't have allowed him.
72 hours later, we have a plea deal. And the way the plea deal came down, the way you guys were notified is disgusting. I've never seen that in 30 years. Like that, there's all kinds of craziness going on there.
We just learned that his family was there at the plea deal. His family was there. So they learned before we did. That's the disrespect.
What are you getting at, though, Si? If you can just connect the pieces of what you're trying to say a little more. I'm just trying to follow.
We have the ineffective counsel claim. We have the plea deal gets worked out within 72 hours. And Taylor stays on as Kohberger's attorney. Like this last year, she's the only person on the jail logs that was visiting him on a regular basis. He hasn't sought out new counsel. She's very much in his ear on a daily basis. We then see the Turvey Whitcomb book come out where, hey, there's all this conspiracy. Anne has to separate herself from that and says, oh, I don't agree with this. I'm going to reprimand you guys. Like, don't.
And guys, listen carefully to this because this is so important. And this is a fundamental question I'm asking, in this video when we put everything that I'm presenting to you here together. And it's why I called it Kohberger claims coerced plea, but Ann Taylor keeps visiting. I wanted to call it what the fuck is going on, but YouTube doesn't like that in the title. But this is really fucking twisted in my opinion. I really want to know what you guys think.
Say these things, and now we see Bryan drop. And I knew the appeal was coming. In my book that I sent to the publisher in February, which is a manual, it's not a Bryan Kohberger tell-all, I put it in the book. Like the appeal is coming. There's no doubt about it.
You called it before it happened.
And what I'm convinced about is Turvey and Ann are together on this. Turvey and Ann are not at odds. Ann needed some new information because that's the only way an ineffective counsel gets any legs at all. They need something new to get spun up. They need it to be very well known. And now there has to be this separation where Ann.
And I just want to say that's Ann Taylor's MO. I've been talking about this, making videos about it since, what was the first thing? When, when they were trying to compel Bethany Funk to testify against her will on the basis of her being a material witness. And the long and the short of it is, I have a number of videos about it. Like, this is Ann Taylor's MO. When she, so, there's a gag order, there's professionalism, there's things that can and can't be said in open court. There are things that can and can't be said by the attorney about the client, about the case, particularly under this extremely broad and strict and unconstitutional, in my opinion, gag order. So she, always has some kind of ace in the pocket, and she is very strategic, and she knew how important the court of public opinion and, that influence on the outcome of this case and Bryan Kohberger's guilt or innocence was going to be. And one of her main strategies was to defend him through these horrific charges via gaslighting. And I think what he's saying right here about Brett Turvey and Ann Taylor, she says, I can no longer, unless I have this continuation, I cannot effectively defend this client for a number of reasons, for reasons of appeal, for reasons of potential professional sanction against you yourself as an attorney, and just also reasons of human dignity and, and pride in what you do. That's not something a defense attorney, especially after fighting as hard as Ann Taylor did for her client, is going to say in open court, especially out loud, not even in emotion, for all of the world to hear and see with their own eyes and all of their senses. And then just a few days later, he pleads. And then this whole Turvey thing. And she writes him this letter that to me was really out of character, calling him out and admonishing him for, infringing on an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. Well, you know what? Your client is pled guilty. There is no trial. The matter is over. Nothing is being adjudicated. There are no longer any sides. So as far as an NDA goes, as the NDA is, the information, the content, the rhetoric that's being protected by the NDA is contents of the trial that could impact the outcome of the trial or should remain, private for, strategic reasons to defend your side. They're in effect could not be an NDA that he breached by talking about things that he was going to testify to when he was planning on being an expert who would testify for the defense in the trial, because it never happened. And she's a very smart woman, if nothing else, and she knew that. So to me, all of that, her letter with Brent Turvey and that whole, little, your panties all in a bundle about that, and that, just little flare up about that, that was one of a classic of Ann Taylor's dog and pony show to use gaslighting to the public, to fool the, potential opponent and to garner support for herself, or at least say, hey, look over there, nothing is happening here. Well, I just, what he's saying is really ringing true. And I should have just let you listen to it rather than commentating on it here, but I'm going to do that now. What do you guys think? Did that make any sense? What do you guys think of Ann Taylor in general?
Is helping Bryan, but not directly involved. And who takes that role is Turvey. So Turvey comes out, says all this nonsense. Bryan writes his thing. The last missing piece, and mark my words, I think we're going to see it in the next 60 to 90 days, Ann will absolutely fall on her sword for BK. She is a true believer. She believes he's innocent. She has an unhealthy relationship with him. And I think we're going to see Ann come out in the next 60 to 90 days, maybe a little bit longer, depending on the timeline. And she's going to eat the ineffective counsel. She's going to say, he's right. I missed it. I should have known about it. And
big break moment. I just looked at it with a new lens, with this new thing. Yeah. I'm going to go even further. I'm going to let some stuff out of the bag. So I've talked to some authors, and so they actually have footage of BK boxing. He's an amateur boxer. They have a whole thing of him in the ring. 3 minutes, 162 punches. 160.
Okay, so for those of you who were there in the beginning, this is what I was referring to, that I knew he was going to tell this story, because I heard large pieces of this already. I didn't watch the whole thing all the way through, but as to, people say that he couldn't do it on his own in those 6 to 8 minutes that were available. Well, for all of the reasons I told you, I believe, and again, this is just opinion. It's not something that can be proven one way or the other. Plus, this additional information was apparently going to become evidence of Bryan Kohberger delivering 162, boxing ring, sanctioned punches in under 3 minutes. He has some stamina, and the kind of stamina that would certainly allow one individual of his stature with a 7-inch blade to murder 4 young, intoxicated, sleeping or almost sleeping young people in the comfort of their own home, where they're just expecting to, drift off into la la land. I think that I love that point. I wish I wish there was a trial, because I think it, I think it, seals the justice that is delivered, if hopefully it is justice is delivered during the course of the trial, because there's I'm not going to say anything else, but yeah. So that's just a good thing about it. But also learning about all this evidence and all of this information and these factors that are really important to considering the totality of the crime and the possibility of it being committed by the person who is accused in the way it is being stated by the prosecution is just very, very interesting.
That was going to be he couldn't do 150 in 12 minutes. Now they have him in 3 minutes throwing blows of 162 times. So there was more than enough time. There was actually more time for you to go in and maneuver and do things, change clothes, whatever you did. There was time there. And they were going to show him physically doing it against another human being that was willing to fight him. And these people are sleeping in bed. They had a really good plan. Some parts they were going to execute really well. Other parts they didn't execute as well. But to anyone who thinks that somebody could go in there, they didn't have enough time, you don't know your facts. They were going to show you to your face.
So you think, Sai, right? I mean, you would know, I guess you were on the inside, that Ann Taylor actually believes he's innocent and has an unhealthy relationship with him?
I am concerned about the ongoing communication, the protection, just that I don't know how else to explain it, almost as like a motherly instinct with Bryan. To Steve's point, 100%. The Kohberger family was way more involved on that plea deal than the victims' families ever were. I believe that there was conversations going from the jail in real time of this thing going down. There's no doubt about that. But
he should be concerned. At the very least, is inappropriate from a professional standpoint. And Ann Taylor seems to conduct herself with a great deal of professionalism, or at the very least, a very clear awareness of how her professionalism is being perceived, by others. And she certainly has, her law degree and her ability to practice without being sanctioned and having her record sullied means a great deal to her after all of the schooling and blood and tears and practice and, losses and failures and everything you go through to become an attorney with as much experience as she has. So the fact that these visitations and this level of communication was carrying on with Kohberger a year after he pled, we're right about a year now, only for him within a couple weeks of their last meeting to turn around and say that he was coerced into a plea due to threats and promises that were and gross misrepresentations by his own counsel is very, very bizarre and unhealthy. I don't know if that's it's definitely unprofessional, and it is certainly cause for concern. My ears are perked up.
I've done a lot of these cases. I've done a lot of death penalty cases. It is very unusual for the defense attorney on the case, especially one who's technically a public defender, to stay involved and active with the defendant in prison visitations the year following a plea deal. That is incredibly rare. The case is done. No one is in contact with him. So the idea that it's all Ann and only Ann, and he hasn't obtained a new attorney for this appeal, to me is very telling. I think jail logs and jail calls would really expose a regular routine between Ann and Bryan that they're visiting and talking on a weekly, if not daily basis at times, which is.
The FOIAs are in. The FOIAs are in. I'd already put the FOIAs in the general, but since this came out last week, I put in some specific FOIAs, and I'm sure other people did too. And oh God, we better get them back. I think Idaho, has been pretty good about releasing Freedom of Information Act to the public, protected documents and information to the public. I was going to say something, but I forgot it. Oh, for those of you who don't know or who weren't here in the beginning, as of this morning, Bryan Kohberger was in fact appointed a new defense attorney, yes, at the expense to Idaho taxpayers, to help see him through this post-conviction relief that apparently, by the fact he's been assigned attorney, it is given a degree of validity and as I'm sure you've heard, if you've heard anyone talk about this, who knows what they're talking about, the chances of him being successful with this are slim to none, is kind of what I'm understanding people are saying. But this case is fucking crazy. So I don't know. Buckle up, Buttercup.
Weird. Yeah, that's unhealthy in my opinion. As a criminal defense attorney, you got to keep that line between your clients, right?
Yeah, I was told by insiders that it's a small community we live in that said she's purposely after you, Steve. She's watching your interviews, making us all watch it together and coming up with discovery based off your conversations. And once I learned that, guess what? I started talking about Bluetooth. I started talking about other things and just put her on rabbit trails just to play chess with her. But okay. I've heard some really unnatural things are going on in this case.
Is there I'll save Steve for a minute. On Olivia's cue, is there? I'm just joking. Is there evidence, Cy, that we don't know about that was never public?
I think there's definitely stuff that has been withheld and has still been withheld. I don't know how much it was conveyed to the victims' families, universally, not just Steve and Olivia, but across the board. There's some really disturbing things on his internet history that I don't know ever really came out that would be incredibly hard to just simply show and walk away from a jury not thinking that it's going to leave a big impact, especially on the case of this nature. I'm talking right now specifically his porn history. He's got a very disturbing porn history that I think really paints a picture.
And that's all non-consensual acts. And I also heard gay, male to male gay. Is that accurate?
And YouTube, forgive me, and trigger warning. And if you have grandchildren in the room, usher them out or put me on mute right now. Okay. I heard, not from an official source, but a couple reliable sources, that we are talking something that is illegal in most jurisdictions. I don't think it's a federal, but is some serious snuff. I heard that what they could find on his electronic devices was chock full of snuff. As a behavioral therapist, I need a moment of silence. If that's true, wow.
I don't know on the gay stuff, and quite honestly, I don't mean this in the way it's going to sound. I'm not focused on the gay porn. For me,
I know what you're focused on.
For me, you hit it on the head, Olivia. The non-consensual, violent nature of the porn.
I was aware of terms drugged, raped, passed out, sleeping.
I would go more on incredibly violent sexual encounters. So not the sleeping or passed out, but very aware of what's happening and it being very, very violent, which is always a tough thing for a defense attorney to get through. That's something that's going to really tell a story about somebody's character.
And he was smart enough to not say snuff on YouTube, but I wasn't. So if this live stream goes bye-bye soon, well, we'll all know why. But I hadn't heard that in a while. But when he said that, I did hear him say that in this part of the interview. I did hear, and I just felt like I was going to throw up. And Sirius Black, are you saying that you heard that as well? Yikes. MH says, oh my God, I thought they were going to criminology cases, not that. Oof. Yeah. Yeah, that's like, yeah. Yeah.
Sure. I think that there's stuff to still come out. I think you guys are going down the right road. I've quietly been watching, waiting for more to drop. I can tell you, for me, the location information and the pattern of life, it hasn't come out because I don't think they ever looked at it. And it is by far the most telling of what we have out there. By the way, the day after this, he turns the phone off again. So, again, they're trying to show these patterns, and they do a pretty good job of showing, hey, prior to the murders, he turns his phone off on this days, but it's like they just stopped on November 13th. And as an investigator who's looking at a lot of crimes like this, I want to see what he's doing the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next month. Like, that is a really critical period too, that we see very defined behaviors of suspects like this. And the very next day, he heads to Moscow, he turns his phone off, he turns it back on, and he's southbound on I-95. It's almost a mirror of what you saw the day before.
The Barnhart said that they found a config file that they had to reproduce, and luckily they had exact same phone, but basically he went through a pattern. He turned off the Wi-Fi, then I'm going to mess this up, but he turned off the Wi-Fi, like airplane mode, then put VPN, and then put VPN to only establish connections after start. And he did this whole thing, and that was brand new. He hadn't done that in the config files. That was the first time he did it, and they're going to bring that forward to say that this is a new behavior, just same thing that you're saying, a new behavior that he did before and after, and he doesn't do it again. He stops coming back to the Moscow area after the murders. He doesn't go back there anymore. So anybody who thinks he's over there just shopping, they're like, and I guess the message really is to the world is you can't commit these crimes anymore and get away with it. And that's really what I'm trying to say is I just learned recently with the labs I'm working with, I can't say this on regular TV, rapes are getting very, very rare. People don't get away with rape anymore because there's the fluid exchange, and that's leading everyone starting to learn. If I do this, I'm going to get caught. And we need that same message in these murder cases. And I don't know how to say that in a mainstream media format, but we got to, I'm trying to work on it.
Thank your podcast, Brian Enton.
What'd you say, Olivia?
So we're just going to tank your podcast instead. My apologies.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
So on that, Steve and Olivia, let me give you a name. Follow this case. I think it's really, really important. The name is Matthew Nilo, Nilo. So Nilo.
Okay.
Matthew is an attorney who was practicing in New York, but he went to law school in Boston. And in the early 2000s, when he was in law school in Boston, he was a serial rapist. And I want to say he had 7 victims that they've identified. About 2 years ago, maybe 3, man, time's flying right now. Maybe a little bit longer. Just after these murders, they did the exact same thing, the exact same team with IgG. And they took some of the DNA from one of those rapes. They ran it through IgG. And like I said, it's the same team that worked on the Kohberger case. And they got a hit on Nilo. And they went and did the 1-to-1 comparison. They got it. They arrested him in New York. That case is working its way through Massachusetts right now. He's going to challenge the IgG, and he's going to win. The thing I want you guys focused on, because this is probably one of the more infuriating things. And if somebody's told you this, I'll shut up. But if they haven't, they are doing a huge disservice to all of the victims' families right now by not giving you guys the lay of the land. The defense is going to buy all the time they can until one of these IgG cases hits a major appeals case or the U.S. Supreme Court. When it does, you can kind of mark my words here, the rule is going to become you have to have a search warrant for IgG. You just have to. Most states have already started to adopt it, but this Nilo case is really likely. He's got the resources, the funding, and the knowledge to take this to the Supreme Court. If that happens, and they actually look at, hey, when you sidestep the search warrant and you step outside of policy, IgG is out. If that ever happens, that is Brian's gold card right there. And I think that the defense, they're watching this case very carefully. They're waiting to see what happens with this. And everything you guys are going to see the next year or two is nothing more than buying time.
But would that even matter if he pled guilty? I mean, it's not like he had a trial and then was found guilty, and then he could go back and say, oh, the evidence they used at trial against me, is unfair. Like he still pled guilty. And that had nothing to do with the IgG.
So here's the issues, and there's 2 huge issues here. And again, Steve, if somebody's explained this to you, then I'll move on. If not, like you guys, you have to be aware of this. The fact that the prosecution probably never told you about Garza versus Idaho, and commit that one to memory. So Garza versus Idaho is a U.S. Supreme Court involving Idaho, where a guy who took a plea deal, who voluntarily pled guilty, actually got it reversed, and he took it all the way to the Supreme Court. So plea deals are not the closing of a case. Plea deals aren't like, okay, we're going to put this behind us. We're going to let everybody get closure here. Anytime a prosecutor frames a plea deal as closure, they're doing a huge disservice, because plea deals get turned over.
I just feel the responsibility as the facilitator of this conversation to point out that what Cyree is talking about right now, that a prosecutor should never do, it's a huge irresponsibility. It's dishonest. It's manipulative. It's so painful. And, a horrible thing to do to families is to say, well, it took a plea. The, criminal appeals are no longer available to him. This is all over. It's going to be in the past. It's going to be resolved. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And we are all going to skip and dance happily off into the sunset. No prosecutor believes that, because it's not what happens. And people who were being honest, who are knowledgeable about the way the law works and can work, we're saying that's bullshit. Just because he doesn't have an appeal, there's always a way. There's always a way. And this is, I mean, there really was a way. And it's civil post-conviction relief. And of course, I mean, what's going on right now? And it's just, I guess I'm kind of just trying to work through it myself, coming to terms with, I just didn't want to believe that the prosecution failed so terribly. Like I said, I like to believe in our justice system. I like to believe in those who are, stewards of justice in our system. But sometimes I do recognize that, things are going really wrong when I need to. District Attorney Rourke, I see you, bitch. But I like to believe people are doing good. But it's very clear that the prosecution failed their constituents, they failed the public, they failed these families, they failed the victims, they failed justice, and they failed, they took a little piece of that, fabric that's been, being woven for 250 years now, that is trying to instill the trust of the citizens of our country in the government and those who are chosen as stewards of our government to see us to justice, to guide us there, and to do it correctly. And every time, I have to realize that, the prosecution is like what I now believe it is in Bryan Kohberger's case, lazy, sloppy, saving, anything but zealous, not champions of justice. Somehow they're able to live with themselves knowing that they chose, comfort in their own life for that time being by being lazy at the expense of causing these families so much pain and depriving the precious lives of these victims, the justice that they should be given, even though their lives are gone now. It deeply, deeply saddens me, and we got to do better.
All the time on appeal. The second thing, and man, I am not a Hippler fan at all. I think Hippler made a critical error when he made the ruling that IgG could come in as a tip, so be it. But the moment he prevented the defense from being able to expose to the jury that the lab techs willingly, knowingly violated their own policy to do it, it's not a constitutional issue. That evidence comes in, but it does become a credible.
I'm sorry, Beehive. Did I say appeal? That's why I was intentionally trying to not say appeal. An appeal would be, the criminal court route, the relief that would be available after somebody is convicted if they did not plea and, relinquish their rights to an appeal. So that's not available to him. So the only relief that is available is post-conviction relief, which is not technically an appeal. And it was the only relief that would be available after that plea was made, and he relinquished the possibility of filing a traditional appeal. And of course he's taking it. So if I misspoke, I'm sorry. I am tired. I always have my live streams like at the end of my day. I should try doing them earlier in the day. My brain is a little fresher. Maybe I'd feel a little more sparky.
Issue. And any other court in the United States, when anybody associated with law enforcement oversteps a policy as it relates to evidence, you got to explain that on the stand. And I think if the prosecution did it right, you can explain that. Hey, for the interest of justice, for X, Y, and Z, yeah, we made this tactical decision. But the moment that Hippler made the decision that the jury can never hear about any of that, and the defense is not allowed to cross-examine officers who knowingly, intentionally violated policy on one of the most critical pieces of evidence in this case, that is a judicial oversight. That in of itself, when challenged properly, has the ability to bring this case back. Now, to Steve, to your point, do it right. 10 times out of 10, he gets convicted and maybe more comes out and it really does put some closure behind this thing. Bring back the death penalty. I am all for this. But I think that I don't agree with the national populace right now that his appeal doesn't have legs, and it's very unlikely it's going to happen. I think there's a couple things, and if it falls into place just right, it could happen. So I just say that as prepare yourself, right?
I've talked to some crazy labs, and there's some multi-billionaire. Okay, his house got broken into. Somebody stole his safe. Didn't just take it. Didn't just break into it. They took it. And long story short, a cigar was left behind. This guy hires a private lab to get a snip off of it, and then uploads it to all, and goes and finds the person who robs his house and shot his dog, which is like, it's like a movie, okay? And he gives it to the cops as a tip, and they said he basically arrested this guy and kind of is taking shit over it because he was supposed to handle it himself. So long story short, he starts his own company, and he's just going through certain locations that he's deemed as high risk, and they're just grabbing people's DNA and uploading it as if they own it. But once you abandon your DNA, you don't own it. So then they're making these databases to sell to the freaking cops. It's I'm going to say he's a criminal, and this is a weird story, but I really don't know he was or not, or he was just a shady business guy. But he found a niche, and he's going in there because the database, CODIS, is puny. There's almost nobody in it. So they need to get to these bigger ones, and he found this niche, and they're like, we're afraid to work with this guy because we feel like this is going to get shut down. But this is the stuff that's going on, Steve. This is the wild, wild west of IGG.
What were you going to say, Olivia? Were you going to say something?
Yeah. So I guess that I just don't follow the logic completely, that this is not an appeal. This is a post-conviction relief. The relief that he's asking for is for his guilty plea to be removed. Let's say that it's all granted. That essentially puts him back on the trial court. Let's say that they successfully delay until the Supreme Court decision in which it is deemed to be unconstitutional for the IGG process. We're assuming that that's going to be then done retroactively, then apply to this case. Let's assume that happens. Let's assume that IGG gets removed. It doesn't change his DNA being a direct match to the DNA on the sheath. So I guess I'm not following how we jump from these things happening. And I know you said that they're unlikely, you were like, if these things all fall together. But I'm not following how these things all fall.
Oh, and this is horrible because she's realizing the horrific possibilities of what is happening right now. And this is exactly the type of thing, future possibilities that the prosecution was hiding from these families, was lying to them about because they didn't want to deal with it, because they'd rather be comfortable and lazy and not do their job well. That is the conclusion that I've come to. Shame on them. We must do better. But, imagine if that scenario were to play out and they just delay. Supreme Court decision comes down. Anything having to do with IGG is not admissible, needs to be thrown out. It's retroactive. It's all fruit of the poisonous tree. Fuck it. Let the violent, mass murders like this dude who, get off watching snuff, from what Sirius Black and I have heard from multiple sources now, apparently, just walk the streets freely. I say that those FBI agents who decided that they were going to go through the loopholes and use IGG in their, privileged way, walking all over the rights of citizens in our country, rather than, as FBI agents, I would say, being leaders of the other law enforcement agencies that are working on the case, and, giving them a nod, some encouragement, some support, some know-how, some whatever you need to, so they do things the right way. And this is not a future possibility. These poor families who have suffered the most horrific thing I could ever imagine in their lives already, so they would never have to worry about this. So I say that those FBI agents get to keep Bryan Kohberger as their own personal pet for the rest of their lives. Yes, right under their home every day. You're responsible for grooming him, feeding him, cleaning up his waste, taking him for walks, providing him, ample outdoor space where, the SPCA isn't going to come and accuse you of animal neglect or abuse. I mean, I'm being a little bit silly, but because the ramifications of what has gone wrong here are so very serious to these families. And also obviously our system of justice, but like right now, I just feel so concerned about these families. We're lied to. Never okay.
Together to then have the IgG removed, which then puts us in a position where the case is at risk considering the DNA is a match. So maybe the work was ethically budged, but the work itself is good.
Yeah, so let me give you a couple things on that. The best case I can reference you to is Carpenter versus US. And what Carpenter is, it's a bank robbery case, so obviously not anything of the nature of what we're talking about here. But in Carpenter, they do some cell tower dumps and they look at cell phone records, and they're able to place Carpenter at the scene of this bank robbery using cell phone records. Mm-hmm. But it's the FBI. And, in 2017, well, actually the ruling's in 2017. The case actually happens about 2010, 2011. The FBI gets involved, and instead of using a search warrant to get the phone records, they use basically what they call an admin subpoena, which is a supervisor at the FBI saying, hey, this is relevant to a criminal investigation, give us the stuff. So Verizon gives them the records, and they put him at the crime scene. They recover some evidence based on the phone records. He goes to prison. It goes on. He finally gets his appeal. It goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and this was the first case in the United States that challenged, can law enforcement look at your location data without a search warrant?
Geo warrants?
Yeah, and basically the Supreme Court said, no, looking into your location data is so personal, it requires a search warrant. And this was the landmark case for cell site location information that requires law enforcement. And now everybody except for the FBI was getting search warrants for a decade before this because we all knew where this was going, but the FBI was doing it at that point.
So how does he have a claim?
So it reversed. It reversed the conviction because the conviction was based on the phone records, and the Supreme Court said, hey, you should have had a probable cause search warrant and you didn't. The phone records went away. So they had to retry Carpenter and prove the case without the phone records, which luckily they had a ton of evidence and they were able to do. So that's the first one is, should law enforcement have reasonably obtained a search warrant? And this is my hang up on the Kohberger case. And the answer is so simple. If law enforcement would have written a search warrant for what they were doing with IgG, it doesn't hurt anything. We can seal search warrants. I don't have to release it. I'm going to go back to my undercover days. We did a lot of cartel cases. I was a cop in Arizona, so we had a lot of cartel cases on the border. We used to steal cars to wire them with GPS because we needed to get access on the car to get our GPS in there, right? So we would literally order the key from the manufacturer, and we would go steal cartel members' cars, and then we would plant the GPS in it, and then we recover it and give it back to them. It's a great scam. We wrote search warrants to ourselves so that we documented what we were doing, and there was transparency with legal oversight on our actions. When we allow the FBI to go through back doors and to kind of trick the system, and if you ask them, well, why didn't you write a search warrant to GED, match GED? Well, we didn't write the search warrant because they wouldn't have given us the info.
I think it was Heritage.
Well, it was Match and Heritage, so both of them. So the idea there is, man, if they reverse that, and then you get Steve Nye, and you talk about somebody who should not have been involved with this case. If you guys haven't seen his, you know who Steve is?
Jeff Nye?
Jeffrey Nye. Sorry,
Yeah,
Jeffrey
yeah.
Nye.
Okay.
Yeah.
He did an interview in August with Fox News. You guys have to go watch this interview, and he explains the.
I think he actually told this in purpose because Christy Dawn asked him, "What do you worry about?" And he said the same thing.
Who?
And yeah, I've
yeah.
I've worried about. It's not so much him explaining, because I agree with him. The entire case was hinged on the IgG. It's what he says towards the end when he says, and usually with these type of things, we can argue inevitable discovery. And what inevitable discovery is the Carpenter case. Yeah, we have these phone records and it helped put the case together, but take the phone records out, inevitably we still would have discovered all this stuff and we could prove the case. And that's why Carpenter is still in prison today, even though those records got thrown out.
Especially considering it went to Othram first and they found the right tree. They were on the wrong branch. And Leah Larkin herself testified in the Franks hearing that eventually it would have led to him.
100%. 100%. The problem is Jeffrey Nye on Fox TV during.
Hey guys, I just want to let you know that it seems like you guys that are here are enjoying watching this. Is that true? I have to go take care of my bunny that's having the medical issues. There's about, I'll be back, but I need to step away for a minute. She's having some issues. 57 minutes in mods, just so you know, 57 minutes, 57. There's like 23 minutes left. So I'm just going to let this play, but I just want you to be aware that I'm stepping away for a little bit. So if somebody's trying to get my attention or something crazy happens, or you just miss me, I'll be back. I'm just giving you the info. Oh, this would be a really good time to hit the like too. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That interview said, we didn't even argue inevitable discovery because there was nothing that applied for it. And I'm like, dude, shut up. What are you saying? More importantly than even what Othram found, we have to remember on November 29th, Washington State University identified Bryan Kohberger and the vehicle, realized that he had just swapped his plates for Washington plates, and notified Moscow PD. The idea that Bryan Kohberger would have been completely absent of this investigation minus IGG is absurd. All they had to do was follow up on credible leads. That's it. That's all they had to do.
Okay. So yeah, I think that we're on the same page.
And I'm not saying I ever think this thing gets reversed. What I'm saying is if you guys, as the victims in the case, in all of the victims' families, if you're not being told, hey, this could be 5, 6, 8, 10 years before this thing works itself out in the criminal justice system, you're being misled. The Carpenter case, well, that was a 2011 arrest. That case came down in 2018. And that's just the appeals process. That's not even the initial case. So I think we're in for a very long ride on this. I think there's a lot of things that are going to still happen. I don't know that he's going to get his post-conviction relief. I think they're anticipating that. All that does is now it forces it into an appellate review. And it's the appellate review that I worry about.
Do you think that'll...
I guess I'm not understanding that point either. How does a post-conviction relief force it to an appellate court? Because he won't even get a hearing. His argument is nothing but ineffective counsel, which was asked in the plea questionnaire that he answered extensively to, as well as life in prison isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I was, quote unquote, threatened by the idea of death row. There's no other meat to
hair in Ethan's hand.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Clumps of hair, which we know is completely fabricated. That's not reality. And his own defense, Ruth Ballard, testified on the 23rd of January that it was consistent with Ethan's own hair. So he can't say that that's exculpatory because obviously the prosecution didn't withhold that from them. So that doesn't work out either. So I guess I'm not understanding from how we get to, he's not even going to get a hearing. Mark my words. Let's say that I'm wrong. He gets a hearing. How does that throw it into an appellate when he's not asking for his plea waiver to be removed? He's asking for his guilty plea to be removed.
He's not a lawyer. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
He's an officer trying to help us.
Please. If you don't know.
No, I get it. I would be so frustrated. In fact, I would be like, just please release the guy. The only thing I ask.
That's why they won't talk to us.
That's how I feel. Just release. Let's just release him.
Yeah, they won't talk to us because these are the kind of questions that we give to Thompson, and Thompson just his eyes start darting.
But I don't think that it's not an unfair question. Like you said, I don't know that Cy has the answer, but that's what Olivia's asking is really the question. I mean,
here's the thing that we have to keep in mind. The post-conviction relief that he's seeking right now is going to go before Hitler. And I agree with you 100%, Olivia. He's going to turn it down. He's not even going to get a hearing. He can appeal that. This is where Garza versus Idaho comes in. He can say, hey, Hitler's already jaded on this. He's part of the problem. I need
the latter
side of that initial team to look at this. It's a long road. They're going to have to file their stuff just right. At some point, he's going to have to get a real attorney to get on board. All I'm saying is if nobody's telling you guys that this is possible, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it's possible. That they're not prepping you guys. The same thing about, hey, if we take this plea deal, we can bring closure to this case. No, it just
exactly that. They told us the opposite. They said, if you guys go with Steve and go for the death penalty, you're going to have hell to pay. But if you just go with, Thompson over here, all your problems go away. And he pleads to it. And you all just go riding into the sunset. And now they're all like, I didn't think he could appeal.
Hashing old news.
Yeah. What's that?
Hashing old news.
Well,
that's Dad.
We're still talking to people that are calling me. Like I just had Randy he couldn't appeal. And we're like,
well, because it's
That
not
was-
an appeal, it's post-conviction relief, and it's going to be denied. Because here's the thing, he could have requested relief in the form of having his plea waiver removed, which would have been a hell of a lot more likely for a judge to say, yeah, sure, whatever, have your appeals back. But he didn't do that. He asked for his guilty plea removed, which logically makes no sense, which is why I think Ann Taylor's not behind this at all.
I read something that Ann Taylor signed an affidavit today.
Asking for the relief that he's asking for isn't asking, if they're trying to buy more time, give him a route to appeals. Say, just remove my plea, or just remove my appeals waiver. But you're trying to remove your guilty plea, which is never going to happen because of the questionnaire that Hippler gave him. It was incredibly extensive, and everything that he brings up in his motion was covered. So unless you're just like feigning amnesia, and unless he truly is just even more stupid than I thought that he was, and I truly thought that this man was stupid, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, and understand
a toddler throwing a tantrum.
Them turning down this first motion for the post-conviction relief is another log on the fire for the bigger appeal issue. We're not done with these motions being filed. I think in the next 69 days, like I'm saying, we're going to see a lot more start coming out of the woodwork. This is just step one to get that. There is a very
step one.
There's a very intricate, very well planned out road that the defense is going to go down here. We're just getting started.
Yeah, the minute they thought they were going to do a plea, they probably had a whole exit strategy to be like, this is what we're going to do. And they sold that to him.
So he's not selling out Ann right now? Ann's part of this?
Ann's me. This is just total.
You can just talk.
That's Zai's theory. That's Zai's theory.
Yeah, we're just spitballing right here.
Yeah.
I've always thought the same thing, honestly. I'm like, how do we know that she's not in on this? Say, hey, we're going to do this. Then after a few months, you're going to file, inadequate,
ineffective
Just
counsel.
an attorney saying, yes, I was ineffective. Like you're looking at motions. You're looking at the evidence that was, attempted to be suppressed. You're looking at, there's so much more than goes into it than just an attorney being like, yeah,
she's essentially going to lay down on the knife, right?
I'm still stuck on what Zai started this whole conversation with, and Christy wasn't here, but that if they had done more digging and processing with the digital stuff, that Zai believes that there's evidence that Kohberger was in the living room at King Road based on the data he had. Like, did you guys know that? Did I just miss that somewhere?
I knew he was following these girls and stalking them online, but they refused. Nobody investigated if there was an online connection. There's no.
Are we talking about that night? That night he was in the living room?
No,
Zai thinks previously, based on the data that he has from the defense.
So fucking terrifying.
Out because we just skirted on past it.
Sorry, I've been thinking about that.
No. You're right.
I'm like, did I miss that somewhere and you guys secretly knew, or I didn't?
Oh, I'm going to go a little bit off script here too, and I could be wrong. And this is where I was asking about the VICAP report and all the questions to family and friends, which I can't find any reporting being done.
Never happened.
The little bit that I have dug into, I also believe it's possible that Bryan Kohberger could have been at that house at certain times and not necessarily even been noticed. I think he could have blended in very easy. A large group of guys specifically, but a large group of college kids hanging out near around the house may not have triggered what everybody thinks necessarily. I'm not saying that there's evidence of him breaking in the middle of the night and snooping around the house. I believe there's evidence of him late at night being at, near, or in the house, but it's also at high traffic times in that general area. And I believe he could have blended in really easy. The other thing I'm going to throw back to Steve that is just mind-numbing to me is there is a pattern of him looking at multiple houses. I believe he's a serial killer. I believe that was the intent here, was he was going to start his serial killer spree, if you will. And one thing you have to understand about the psychology of serial killers is part of what drives them, part of what fuels what they're doing is the randomness of selecting victims, watching victims and thinking in their head what they could do. That is a huge piece of serial killers. And I think he had multiple targets throughout the entire Moscow, Pullman area. And when you look at his phone at night, that's what he's doing. He is going around hitting these different houses, watching people, interacting with them potentially. I cannot find any history where somebody's taken the phone records and mapped out all these locations and then gone to law enforcement reporting to say, hey, what reports of a prowler, suspicious person, stalking type behavior, like just give us all the calls for service in these different areas and see, can we match up? Hey, he keeps going back to this other house on the northeastern side of Moscow. Oh, weird. The neighbor across the street has called in 3 times about a white car. Like, how does that change this investigation dramatically? And these are some of those things that I keep saying are just completely absent from this investigation. And the only reason I'm saying all of this part, Olivia, is I personally want him to get the appeal. I say, let's bring it on, get a new trial. But let's do it right. Let's get the right investigators involved, and let's go show the world just how depraved this guy was. Let's bring back the death penalty, make it happen. I worry that they don't do that and they fall back on this. Well, he's not going to get the appeal. We're not worried about it. Oh, crap. He made the first hurdle. He's not going to make the second hurdle. We're okay. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a position 5 or 6 years from now that there is a real possibility of a new trial, and they haven't done anything to patch the holes from the first round. And that's where I've been very vocal with anybody who will listen. The time is now to start this investigation over, to do it, just document it, get it done. It's not a crazy expense. I mean, we've done everything at our own expense. I probably have about 50,000 invested in my Kohberger nonsense at this point. Like, there's people like myself and other people and stuff that you guys are doing that you can do this the right way. I think it's all about getting a mental mindset of where this thing can go, being very real and truthful with the victims' families to explain, hey, here's a number of scenarios. And even if it's a 1% chance, it's something that we need to discuss. And hey, how do you combat this? If lightning strikes twice here, how do we make sure this guy never walks? Because that, at the end of the day, is the real goal here. This is why I've been so outspoken, is we can never allow somebody like this to walk, especially if
four murders. The FBI told me, they looked at me like, Steve, I know you're concerned, but do you think somebody with 4 murders is going to walk? We have to do everything perfectly. And it was crazy that when you told me that you felt like there was more mistakes on that side, I was just like, and that was the side I was almost going with. If the other families would have told me, kick Kaylee out and you guys go do your own thing, I would have, but they were like, no, we want you to be the loudmouth and pretend like we don't like you. But the truth is, if you're not here, we're all in fucking trouble because now we got to get our heads out of the sand,
Yeah.
So you don't think it was just...
Make sure I hit your points there.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Christy?
So you don't think it was just... Sometimes I think that people just put too much thought into it. And I think, look, he happened to spot one of the girls at some point in time. He started following them to their house, started watching them, found out that it was, a house full of girls, perfect for him, score, everything that he was, really needing and wanting. And he, started planning on, murder, and, obviously had his knife and whatnot. And finally that night he just pulled the trigger and went in. I mean, I don't understand why everybody thinks it's so elaborate. You know what I'm saying?
Well, because that house is a dead end road surrounded by other houses. Okay.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Mom. He decided back before he ever moved to Washington that he was going to kill someone. He decided way back when that he was going to kill multiple someones if he was able to continue getting away with it. Okay. He walked into that house after 1. He didn't walk out after 4. He didn't anticipate this. He thought he'd be way better at it than he was. But part of his game is that he's a hunter. So it gave him an adrenaline boost to see them out in public, to follow them without them knowing, to do these things until that was no longer giving it. That drug hit wasn't enough until 100%. It just kind of became this. He knew he had to do this. There was no getting out of it. He had a separate bank account with money that he had put in there that he hadn't touched, and he was broke as a joke. It's not like he had a ton of money to spare. Starts using it in cash.
Fantasy fund.
fantasy 101, because at the end of the day, he's just an addict. And the drug that he's chased has always just been different. First, it was health and workout and this and that. And then it was, you know, this grandiose that he's healing his, you know, autoimmune disorders because he's so smart and this and that. And it at one point it was heroin even. He's an addict that has always been obsessive and addicted to something. And he became addicted to this idea of chasing this high of killing someone. It wasn't personal to him.
100%. You couldn't have said that better. 100%. I agree with you. And if he ever does walk, he will kill again.
Yeah, of course he will.
We know they investigated him back in Pennsylvania, and it didn't go anywhere, but they definitely were concerned.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
he
I think-
escalated predatory behaviors until they no longer fulfilled his needs.
So I didn't get Thorn Road right, but was that close? Was that closer than Payne's little loop?
Oh, stop it.
That's terrible. It's about, if you look at where Thorn is and the road comes down, it kind of 95 doglegs around.
Okay.
Dogleg, it starts to go straight again. It's the third dirt road after that one. There's a farm that sits right on 95 right there. And that's where he worked his way back up to Thorn, and then he came back down. So he goes across up to Thorn Creek and then back down around, and he actually shoots out back onto, I think it's 195.
That was definitely close. And
It's not
AI helped me because I was trying to pull the timestamps all together with the 448, and 448 was my source of truth.
That he was stopped there. Cy Ray said that he was stopped there for about 10 minutes. We never anticipated that long of a gap that he was stopped there. We always 1 to 2 minutes. So the timeline that we had
gone farther down than he's probably needs to be.
Yeah. So it's not his fault.
From the house to where he stopped, I want to say it was like 14.5 miles. And you saw the rate of speed he was leaving the neighborhood at. I have no reason to believe he's not driving 65, 70 probably on the road. There's a solid 10 to maybe 15, depending on how fast he drove. And again, the part I can't stress enough is he goes back to that exact same spot where he stopped the next night.
Yeah, because he dumped his stuff right
He
there.
did?
He goes back.
Holy
and then goes to the Snake River.
And then as soon as he's there, he goes down to the Snake River, and he doesn't spend any time. He goes to Snake River, and then immediately he's back up 195.
So you think he left the stuff there and went back and got it the next day and then dumped it in the river?
Yeah, and I'll give you guys my theory. I would be really interested in your feedback here, but looking at everything that I've seen, I believe Maddie was the target. I believe Maddie is who he interacted with earlier. There's some other things that kind of support that. I hope a lot of this comes out at some point. I think.
Sorry to know, but why do you say some things to support that? Is that the cell phones?
Yeah, there's a lot more collisions between Brian's phone and Maddie's phone than any of the other victims. And what I'm saying about collision is they start to occupy the same space at the same time. And there is a little bit more of a pattern to that than with the other victims.
And what do you mean, though? I know you don't have all the data in front of you, but in different locations, or like
I want to say August 28th, but I could be wrong if that's a Sunday. The first Sunday after the full week of school starting in August, it's Maddie's phone that I think interjects with his phone in Pullman, and this is the apartment complex right next to Brian's. And they start off at like the student center at WSU, and then they move up to an apartment complex. And I think there was an interaction there that could have been the first crossing of paths. There's multiple times around the house that A&W over time, but consistently it's more with Maddie than the other roommate at that point.
He dips into his fantasy fund and Kaylee's up here. And it was like that's the moment he's going to plan this murder, and she's still down there and Kaylee's up here hanging out with us. So I totally agree, but I can't say that in a forum.
And you guys know better than I would. I think the fact that Kaylee is in the same bed as Maddie that night is somewhat of a fluke. Like, right, that wasn't something he could have predicted. So what I believe starts as a targeted one victim thing very quickly rolls into two. I think Xana interrupted that. And I think there's great
that's the scream.
Well, the scream, but also there's really good. So before, in my prior life, before I started doing a lot of the phone stuff, I did a lot of homicide stuff. I was a blood spatter expert. There is excellent blood spatter in this house that, in my opinion, Xana not only interrupts it, but he chases Xana through a big portion of the house. And that's where Xana comes into, and then Ethan comes into. And to your guys' point of the physical side of this, he's just exhausted by the time he sees Dylan. And that's why Dylan today. And this changes his plan. And this is really important for the investigators to wrap their head around. The route back was going to be the same route that he took there. I believe he was going to go right back out on Indian Hills, up north to that little crossover road, and then come back north of the airport back in, because he can get all the way to his house and never pass a video camera other than the Indian Hills one. But because 911 is being called, he drops down to the south. So yeah, I think it went from 1 to 2 to 4 very, very quickly. Then there's the interruption, which completely throws him off his plan. He doesn't know what to do, but he's smart enough with everything he has on the criminology side, which, by the way, I completely agree with you, Olivia. He is a terrible criminal. His PhD program is not
box of rocks.
Yeah, but he is smart enough to know, and maybe looking for a white car, I shouldn't go driving back up to campus driving a white car with a car full of
and the path that you were talking about where he went, I think Indian Hills Road, everything he did was misdirection. So he didn't want to come in from west to east. He wanted to come from east to west. He was playing the same game. So if he did get caught, he wanted it to appear like he was coming from the opposite direction of where he really came from.
Right. Yeah. I do have to go.
Okay.
But I just want to.
All right, guys. Man, that was awesome. I really appreciate Cy. And Bryan, thank you for putting this together. It wasn't a gotcha. It was organic. Talking with people. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for honestly having such a platform where I do genuinely feel like we have said more in this than we've ever really said publicly. And that's honestly 100% due to you and how you choose to, be a journalist and the open environment that you foster. And Cy-Ray, I just wanted to say thank you. It is what it is. I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your time more than anything else. Just being able to, talk with us and meet on a playing field together.
My little 5 minutes that I have, I'm literally going to go to bed with nightmares now because of the hearing him say that he was in the living room and then hearing him say that he went back to that same spot the next night. I mean,
this is his thought. This is him thinking out loud.
But that just terrifies me. I'm like, oh my gosh. And that
Mom, there's literally not a single thing scary about him. He's the biggest pansy coward ass that you could ever imagine.
The girls were scared.
Well, of course,
the girls were scared because of
vulnerable.
His Mom, and
monsters
he doesn't have
prey on vulnerable people.
Yeah, and same thing, Bryan. Thanks for having me on. And I'll throw this out, Steve. I talked about it earlier, and Olivia, it goes to you as well. And if you're okay with it, Steve, I'll just respond back to that. Yeah, I have your email on, I think, the questions that they sent over, that Courtney sent over. I'll respond back to you. I'll give you guys my contact and my phone number 24/7. Anything you guys ever need, or if you need to bounce anything off, let me know. I'm more than happy to sit down anytime, have as many conversations as you want. If there's anything you guys are doing foundation wise or trying to promote some of the change you guys are talking about, I'm super interested. Let me know how we can help if we can. I can't emphasize enough. We are really trying to push this as a really intense training for law enforcement on how to never fall for this trap again and how to prevent a lot of these things. We're getting an excellent feedback on that. So rest assured, the overwhelming majority of the law enforcement community that I'm working with sees where you guys are coming from. Their heart goes out to you guys. The victimization that you guys have been re-victimized by the process is one of the goals I've always had of trying to prevent. Like, how can I? And that's one of the things I got involved with this case on. It wasn't to ever be Bryan Kohberger's defense expert. It was to keep my ethics and say, look, criminal investigations can never look like this. And if
Okay, with that good word, I think we're going to end there. I'm going to have to run because I've got to take care of my Daisy baby. She's not doing good. But listen, I'm going to be doing a live stream on Thursday night. What's tonight? Tuesday? Correct? Am I correct? I wouldn't know. I took the summer off, bitch. Just kidding. I'm working really hard on getting a lot of stuff done, including my YouTube channel. Just not my traditional job. But it's Tuesday, correct? Am I correct on that? Jesus Christ. It's weird when you don't have appointments every day. No, thanks. I'm going to be doing a live stream Thursday night. If today is Tuesday, I'm going to be doing a live stream on Thursday and Friday. One will be Watts and the other will probably be Lindsay Clancy. I told you guys I was going to be covering the Lindsay Clancy case very closely, and I did some
backstories and was planning on it, but I'm just going to be really honest. I was making content on it and watching the trial day in and day out. And I was like, I wasn't bouncing. It was putting me in a really difficult mental place. And I think maybe part of it is I experienced postpartum depression myself. I can't relate to what she went through. It's a whole, it's a whole, they're just different, right? But, I relate to it in that way, but also as a behavioral therapist, first of all, the psychosis and level of mental illness that she was suffering was, you just really don't see it very much. And if you work with a person who's experiencing something like that to the degree she is, and closely, it's one of those things that, you really have to factor it into how you go about your life and your, professional schedule and all of that, because it really just, it takes a whole piece of you, and it takes a lot more of you to properly support that person. And it just feels like a lot. But then also the way this is all going down in the justice system, I believe that mental health issues, and I think many of you agree with me, are not properly addressed by any means in our society. And I feel that the justice system tries to account for mental health issues to some degree more and more as time goes on, and that's good. It's not a great job. We need to do better. It's not a great job at all. It's not even an okay job, but there's the attempt, and I like that. Okay. I'm like, all right, people trying to do their best. Most of the people trying their best, much of the time, I'm happy with that. But in this situation, the father of the murdered children didn't want her prosecuted. All 4 grandparents didn't want her prosecuted. The community, by and large, didn't want her prosecuted. And the more I thought about it, regardless of the outcome of this case, guilty, innocent, by reason of insanity, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because of Cookie Monster, I don't fucking care. It's all nonsense. It's doing nothing. It's costing so much money, and that is not even close the most important part of it. In fact, it's not even worth mentioning it, but it is a practical consideration. But it's traumatizing a community, a family, a whole system without regard. I don't know. I just can't make sense of it. I don't think that it was the right decision to prosecute her in the first place. I absolutely believe that people need to be held accountable for their crimes and their actions, especially if they commit horrible, horrible crimes. But it is well documented and well understood by just about everyone in this situation that there was something different going on here that was beyond the scope of criminal, remediation or rehabilitation or repayment to society. And it makes me angry, like to the point of like almost hysterical sadness to just see this all going down, just because what the fucking DA wanted to prosecute her, this is all happening. And watching Patrick Clancy on the stand, I listened to every moment of that. And I just, what I'm saying is I can't cover it closely because I don't think I can handle it. I don't think it's worth the toll that it was taking immediately on my mental health. And honestly, and I told some of the moderators this, there's some cases I don't really like to cover because the crime was so, all the crimes are gross. My God, murder's just, they're all gross. Murder, rape, all these horrible crimes that are discussed in true crime. They're all fucking, horrible. But there are some crimes that really just personally kind of are grotesque to me, and I just have a hard time stomaching them. And I certainly have emotional reactions to crimes and victims, and seeing, the impact criminal behavior has had on people who deserve to live beautiful lives. I feel that deeply, but this is just like different. I don't know. I've never tried to follow a case, cover a case where it's had this impact on me, but here we are. So people have been emailing me, community messages and stuff, kind of asking me, oh, why aren't you following it? I thought we were going to be talking about it, with this frequency. And I'm sorry, I can't bring that to you guys, but I know a lot of people are covering it really well. I am just being honest. I just can't do it. But we are going to talk about it because there's really important issues there. I just can't live and breathe it because it was like scary to me that I wasn't bouncing back from it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like dreaming about it. I was waking up and like almost like I was having nightmares about what it's really in my head. I have to kind of figure out why, because also as a behavioral therapist, like when things affect you like that, you have to wonder you might encounter it in your, professional responsibilities and practice. But there's something there that I just really need to consider working through within myself. I am not ready to facilitate like a large conversation about it on a regular, close level, but we will have discussions about it. Yeah. Not to talk according to your theory, but we hear you. A message to the wider world not to talk according to my theory. Is that what you're about this? Oh, I think people definitely should talk about it. I'm just saying I am not like, I'm not the one for this. I am not, a lot, even in, having a true crime channel, discussing these really, these things that have impacted human beings significantly, these crimes that have impacted people more than anything else that has ever happened or ever will, there's kind of you take on a bit of responsibility, but if you're not careful, you're almost taking on a bit of self-righteousness, right? To even decide that you're the person that can responsibly, and I know not everyone's out there to hold responsible, constructive conversations, and I do get that. But if you're the kind of true crime channel I want to be, that's what your goal is. And sometimes it is a little self-righteous, and I think about it, and I want to make sure for myself, I keep myself in check. And I can't always assume that I am the right person to, facilitate a conversation that is going to be beneficial to the community or anyone or myself about every topic, because I'm fucking not, I'm not the it girl for everything. In fact, I'm not the it girl for many things. And there's a lot of things I'm really not good at. And apparently, working my way through the details of this trial and being able to remain level-headed and objective and kind of okay within myself is not something I'm capable of doing. So that's all. Let's see. I wanted to read a comment I had pinned. So let me see if I can find it. And I don't even remember why, but I know I really wanted to read it. Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm sorry I didn't get to interact with you more and hear more of your opinion. I had a pet emergency. I'm kind of still having a pet emergency, but I'm so glad you're here. Let me see. Anyone? Oh, it was after the snuff conversation. Hang with me for a minute if you want to. I'm just trying to find it. Oh, it actually was from you, Nico. I can't help but to believe that if anything by BK doing this gets put back in the limelight and causes more distress to the victims' families and loved ones. And you know what? I think you're exactly right. And I think that any move that he was going to make after the way things turned out and he was allowed to plea without allocution or, specific, revealing specific details of the commission of the crime or of motive or anything like that, set them and everyone up for it. And I think once that was done, it was going to be the case, exactly what you're saying, that anything he would do thereafter will only put him back in the spotlight and cause more distress to the victim families and loved ones. And that is why I feel in this case the justice system failed and we need to do better. But exactly. Yeah. Oh, thanks guys for being understanding. Yeah. I know I talked to a couple moderators when I was doing some content on it and they were like, I'm not gonna, just let me know they didn't think they wanted to participate in the discussion of that trial, which I absolutely always respect. Sirius Black, good night. Thank you so much for being here. Send me an email when you can. Yeah. Oh, no. Okay. See, I'm feeling sensitive tonight. I'm taking all these comments not about me personally. I am feeling a little sensitive tonight. Exactly. At least the states could have done was make him allocate. Exactly. I mean, and if he had to do that, it would have also sort of bound him to words of his own beyond, yeah, are you guilty of murdering Madison Mogen, a human being? Yes. It would have bound him to something beyond yes. That would have been far more challenging for him to weasel his slimy little sneaky incel pathetic bastard way out of. You know what I mean? No offense to the other incels of the world, but hey. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go. I gotta take care of my Daisy girl here, but I'll see you live Thursday night around 9:30 maybe, and same Friday night. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Oh, and I'm dropping a video tomorrow. It is a Watts video. I've talked about it a little bit. Some of you have been waiting for it. It'll be out tomorrow. Only the best for you. I keep going back and adding more and editing things, and finally I'm just gonna have to give up and say, here. This is the slop you get. Take it or leave it. Oh, boy. All right, guys. Love y'all. And remember, life is hard, so please be kind to one another. But most of all, be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace. And I hope you do something awesome for yourself between now and the next time I see you, because you totally deserve it. Bye, guys. Thanks for being with me tonight. Oh, hey, do the YouTube things, like, that's all I ask. YouTube just loves those likes. And we hear about it in the YouTube studios creators if we don't meet their standards. It's so weird because the more successful creators are, the more successful YouTube is. It's a smart but also obnoxious business model. Anyway, don't take my video down, YouTube. I know I already said snuff. I won't do it again. I'm sorry. I'm tired. I'm sleepy. Bye.